Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. American Comics. Starting Social Security Black Silk Wanda. Chapter 21. The exploded robot spider fell to the ground, with steel fragments scattered everywhere. Unicorn, can your suit speed up? Gwen came to Horde's side quickly, looking at Horde's suit with envy. Her eyes were almost full of stars. She couldn't help but stand on tiptoe and stroke the bright red unicorn horn. Hodder looked at her on tiptoe and simply lowered his head to give her a more comfortable rub. What is the principle behind this? Gwen had more fun after noticing the detail of Hod lowering his head. This armor is so cool, and it can be played like that. And this big red horn feels so good. It can be said that everything that happened tonight shocked her. To be precise, it should be like this all day. After all, Mr. Hood, whom I met today, was also very mysterious. Have you touched enough? Hodder turned his head slightly and patted Gwen's little head gently. We should set out to find Kingpin. Well, I just feel it's very comfortable to touch. Gwen reluctantly withdrew her hand. After all, this thing is too cool. It has been bombed by missiles, but the surface is still smooth. There will be bigger ones for you to touch later. Wanda smiled mysteriously. What, do you have other armor? Gwen's eyes widened, and she looked at Horde excitedly. She really didn't expect that there were other armors. Pure little Gwen. Hodder did not answer this question and walked into the factory first. As soon as he walked in, a smell of medicine hit him. Ouch, it stinks. What on earth are they doing in there? Even though she was wearing a hood, the smell still made Gwen cover her nose. It seems that they have a large trading volume tonight. Hodder smelled the smell and instantly understood the purpose of this warehouse. On the surface, it looks like an abandoned factory, but in fact it is where they store goods. And judging from the boxes around, it is estimated that the entire warehouse is full of these goods. Bang! At this moment, there was a loud noise behind him. Even the ground under his feet was shaking slightly with the loud noise. Looking back, he saw that the damaged warehouse door was actually blocked by a thickened iron plate. Judging from the device above, this should be a thickened iron plate specially made to resist foreign enemies. And the so-called warehouse door is just a decoration, and the real defense measure is this iron plate. Thump thump thump. At this time, the dim factory suddenly became as bright as day, and the chandeliers above were suddenly turned on. Welcome to my wood factory. Following the voice, a tall and strong figure slowly walked out of the corridor on the second floor, with a cane in his hand. When he walked out, a group of people suddenly rushed out from other places, all of them pointed their weapons at Hood and Gwen. Kingpin. Gwen's voice was filled with unspeakable anger when she saw Kingpin. Hod, who was standing by, could clearly feel the mixed emotions in Gwen's heart. Little guy, we are really destined to meet each other. I have come all the way here and I still meet you. Jin Bing hooked his hand slightly, and the men beside him immediately handed over a cigar to help light it. I'm coming for you. Gwen gnashed her teeth and yelled. Little Gwen's hatred. Hod sensed Gwen's inner hatred for Kingpin. Coming for me. Kingpin took a deep puff of his cigar and shifted his gaze to the red and silver figure, his eyes filled with anger. If it weren't for your friend, you would have died long ago. He really didn't expect that someone would specifically help this little spider. If I had come earlier, you would have died earlier. Hodder's voice was calm, even with a hint of disdain. This was because he had not heard of Kingpin's appearance, otherwise he would have already taken action. Really? Jin gritted his teeth and looked at Wanda with fear. My friend, you and I have no grudges against each other, why do we have to hurt the harmony? Are you trying to bribe me? Wanda said with a teasing tone. No. Jin Bing smashed the cigar to the ground fiercely, and sparks flew everywhere. He supported his body with his left hand and flipped over, jumping down from the second floor. The moment his huge weight hit the ground, there was even a dull sound. Even if I die, I won't surrender. After saying that, he slowly took off his suit jacket and grabbed the shirt on his chest with his right hand. He tore it off violently and threw the wine-stained clothes aside. Under the clothes, he saw an extremely strong body. You have ambition. Hod nodded in appreciation. He admired Kingpin's courage. Otherwise, he would not have fought his way out of the mixed Hell's Kitchen and become the underground emperor who dominated one side. Come on, I want to see how strong you are. Jin Bing showed a ferocious smile, and his breathing became heavy at this time. Careful. Gwen wanted to remind Hod to be careful, but when she thought of the armor on Hod, she swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. After all, with this strength, it is not certain who can be asked to pay attention to safety. In that case, I will also take off my armor and fight you fairly. Hod strode forward, his voice lazily. He did that for two reasons. The first was to admire Kingpin's bloodiness. The second was that it might trigger a reward. After all, the one he defeated was the Underground Emperor. What? Gwen's head was buzzing. She couldn't understand why Hood would give up his advantage. Obviously, his greatest advantage was the suit of armor on his body. He actually wanted to fight the Underground Emperor in a hand-to-hand combat. Is there anything wrong with his brain? You have to know that Kingpin's frontal strength is greater than hers, and she can't win even if she goes up. This person who relies on armor actually plans to take off his armor. This guy wants to fight the boss. Ha ha ha, I guess this guy's head is full of cheese. Are you tired of living and come here to have fun with our boss? Looks like we have it secured this time. Quote. Quote. Jin Bing's men were also whispering to each other, their eyes full of disdain. They knew how terrifying their boss was, and they were no match for him if they attacked together. If the man was wearing armor, it would not be certain, but if he took off his armor, they would be safe. Jin Bing was overjoyed. The reason why he was afraid of Huoda was because of his battle suit. But without the battle suit, it would be hard to say who would win. He sneered and said, I didn't expect you to be such a brave man. If you beat me, we will be done with each other. Okay. Hodder nodded slowly, turned around and said to Gwen, Little spider, don't interfere, I'll put on a good show for you. Gwen got anxious when she heard this. This is Kingpin. Are you crazy? You will know whether he is crazy or not soon, and it is still uncertain who is stronger and who is weaker. Hodder said, and put his right hand on his waist and directly opened the insect instrument. Buzz. The buzzing sounded. The bright red battle clothes on his body fluttered, and a rhinoceros beetle flew away. Under the light, it looked extremely dazzling. And Hodder's handsome profile, as the mask disappeared, also appeared. This guy. The big eyes on Gwen's mask widened. It's actually Hod. You are Mr. Hodder. Gwen was shocked. At this moment, she finally understood why she felt that the mysterious man was so familiar. Because the mysterious man in front of her was Hodder, so he said he would teach her. So this person is Mr. Hood. No wonder he is always so calm. Gwen thought to herself as she looked at Hood. If it was Mr. Hood, that must be a sure win. Thinking that she would persuade Mr. Huod not to be impulsive, she felt her ears burning. No, it is Huod who should be blushing. He has always known, but he has never revealed his identity. He even pretended to be so cool. She was deceived. Hod Fernandez. When Jin Bing saw the man, his brows knitted tightly, and even the flesh on his face wrinkled together. If I remember correctly, you are a member of the board of directors of Stark Group. He had a certain understanding of the information of these high-level people, and the members of this board of directors were either rich or noble. Well, I seem to have such an identity. Hodder nodded and grinned. Of course you can also call me a brave climber, a pentathlon champion, a charity master, etc. After he owned shares in Stark Group, he did have such an identity. It's just that he never attended such meetings. Mr. Hodder, I don't think we need to be so awkward. Kingpin actually made concessions at this time. He knew very well that if he killed the people of Stark Group, he would really be in trouble. Once there was a problem with the identity and status of these people, it would definitely cause an earthquake. What's more, Tony and the Avengers were not easy to deal with. He didn't think he could deal with those monsters. So if possible, he would rather give up some profits in exchange for Hood's departure. No, but don't be afraid of my identity. Huoda shook his head slightly and said contemptuously, I just want to kill everyone present, or be killed by everyone present. You are going too far. Don't think I am afraid of you. In that case, don't blame me for being ruthless. Jin Bing's eyes were filled with murderous intent. It was the first time he encountered such a provocation. As an underground emperor, he was actually looked down upon by others. Even if the Avengers were behind him, he would never let this person go. And, as long as Hood disappears, no one will ever find him. Come on. Like a gentleman who specializes in etiquette, Wanda rolled up his white sleeves and hooked his hand at Jin Bing. His disdainful look made Jin Bing so angry that his muscles all over his body trembled slightly. There's going to be a good show. Gwen shot out a spider silk and hung herself upside down on the roof to watch the show. She was indeed worried about Hood before, but knowing Hood's identity, she didn't care at all. Kingpin has met a tough guy this time, and he deserves his bad luck. Mr. Hood can control the lizard man at will. Kingpin leaned forward slightly and took a sumo posture, staring at Hood with serious eyes. This is the fighting method he is best at. Because of his huge weight, sumo can better suppress the enemy. Hood looked at Kingpin with disdain, his hands behind his back, as if he didn't take Kingpin seriously at all. You, come and die. Jin Bing was furious when he saw the arrogant look. Bang! In an instant, the ground beneath his feet suddenly cracked. He leaned over and rushed towards Hood, and his speed was so fast that only a flesh-colored shadow was left. It was like a heavy tank rushing towards Hood at the fastest speed. Every time he took a step, the ground of the entire warehouse was shaking slightly. Very fast. Hodder nodded slightly, and had to admit that Kingpin's speed had exceeded the limit of normal people. If it was against an ordinary person, he would not even be able to react to this speed. And Kingpin was heavy, so it was incredible that such a heavy body could burst out at such a speed. Because the greater the force applied, the greater the force endured. If you want to stay flexible, it will put more pressure on the body, but Kingpin doesn't seem to have this worry. But this was only for others. In front of him, he was not good enough, and there was no way for him to cheer up. Facing the collision of Kingpin, when the opponent was about to pounce on him, Hood suddenly pulled his body to the side. The Kingpin passed by him directly. I didn't expect you to react so quickly. The Kingpin stopped after missing the target and turned to look at Hood. It must be said that the distance just now was only a few centimeters, and Hood could be knocked away directly. With his speed, even a slight touch would be like being hit by a truck. However, he was also very keenly aware that Hood must be a martial artist. An ordinary person would never have such speed. But even so, he would definitely not be his opponent. Just as he was thinking, Hood on the opposite side suddenly took action. His movements were as fast as lightning, and one could only barely see the afterimage. Bang! Ha! At this critical moment, Jin Bing hurriedly blocked with his arms. The huge force from his arms made him open his eyes wide. What kind of power is this? Before he could react, he was directly swept away by the huge force. When he hit the wall, the blood in his body surged up and instantly became extremely red. How can this be? What kind of monster is it that can kick the boss away? Can this still be considered human? Quote. Jin Bing's men were all dumbfounded. They had never seen their boss become like this after just one move. As expected, your boss is going to lose. Gwen was not surprised. After all, this was Mr. Hood. She was even now focusing on why Mr. Hood was playing tricks on her. Kingpin's arms felt like they were being torn apart, and he looked at Hood in horror. The force just now was very strong, far exceeding that of the ghost spider. Even his intuition told him that the other party had not used his full strength yet. Got it, Hutchie. As soon as Hood's voice fell, his figure appeared in front of him. With a strong wind, his toes kicked Jin Bing's chest quickly and accurately. Jin Bing's pupils shrank into needle points in an instant, and he gritted his teeth and raised his hands. Bang bang bang. The kicks were like a string of cannons, and they came down as fast as afterimages and heavy rain. There was no chance to breathe at all. In just less than a second, Jin Bing felt severe pain in his arms, as if he was hit by countless sledgehammers. But soon, his arms lost consciousness, and endless blood flowed. The white bones were exposed to the air. His arm was broken. Plop! Jin Bing gasped and knelt on the ground powerlessly. I lost. He had never seen such a terrifying opponent. This was no longer a fight, it could even be called a massacre. He hadn't even touched the corner of Hood's clothes before he was defeated. Ding! You successfully defeated Kingpin in a one-on-one duel. Get reward. Seriously punch. The winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. If you lose, you have to pay the price. Hood listened to the prompt sound of the system in his mind and did not intend to let Jin Bing go. He pinched Jin Bing's head and slowly lifted it up. The winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. What's more, Jin Bing wanted to kill him. At this time, Jin Bing's limbs drooped weakly. Although he was extremely scared, his body did not listen to him at all. Mr. Hodder, can you please not kill him? But at this moment, Gwen let go of the spider silk and jumped down from the roof, speaking to stop. What? Hood looked at Gwen with surprise. Doesn't Gwen hate Kingpin? Kingpin never thought that it would be Ghost Spider who pleaded for him at this time. He breathed a sigh of relief when he heard it. As long as he could stay alive, he would definitely have a chance to come back. But Gwen's next sentence surprised Hood very much. Gwen took a deep breath, gritted her teeth and said, "Let him lie in bed for the rest of his life and be a vegetable." After brief discussion, everyone left to their home. The next day, Hood got a new reward. Serious Punch, Saitama's Serious Punch, a punch that splits the earth in the middle, ignoring any physical magic defense. Each time it is released, the cooldown time is 365 days. In the white big bed of the manor, Hood opened his arms and looked at the system's introduction of rewards comfortably. Saitama's Serious Punch. Looking at the new reward, he subconsciously nodded slightly. He knew that this reward was Saitama's unique skill, but he didn't expect to get such a bug reward. It is estimated that with one punch, almost no creature above the surface can resist it. It's a pity that this is equivalent to a one-time use. Hood let out a long sigh. Although there is a cooldown, the cooldown time is a bit too long. He shook his head and threw this matter out of his mind. Anyway, with the system, it is only a matter of time before he becomes stronger. Ding dong. The phone on the brown bedside table vibrated. Hodder picked up the phone and when he saw the message on it, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise. Because this was a message from Wanda. Wanda, are you asleep? In the Scarlet Witch's room at the Avengers base. Wanda, wearing a crimson translucent nightgown, lay on the bed. The bright red fabric could not hide her fair skin at all. The hemisphere of the earth was squeezed, and Wanda was tossing and turning on the bed. Whenever she closed her eyes, the haunting figure emerged in her mind. So much so that she couldn't help but check the news about Hood on the internet. Looking at the photo above, she couldn't help but smile foolishly, and her longing for him surged more and more. It had not been long since they separated, but she actually felt like the days were passing by like years. After hesitating for a long time, she took out her mobile phone and gritted her teeth to send a text message to Hood. At this moment, she seemed like a little girl, afraid that Hood would not reply to the message. Hood, what's wrong? Did you miss me? When this message popped up, Wanda's body tensed up and her mouth couldn't help but curl up. It was the first time she felt so happy to receive a message. Wanda, can't I send you a message if I don't want to? Wanda stared at the screen, her fair legs swinging. Hood laughed when he saw the message. He could see that the little witch had fallen. Hodder, cute little witch, do you want to have breakfast? Breakfast. Wanda was stunned at first, and then she suddenly remembered what Hood said that morning, and her face flushed. Can you be more serious? She typed quickly on the keyboard. Although she replied like that, she didn't resist in her heart. Because only at that time, she would feel the communication between hearts. She knew that she couldn't help but rely on Huoda. To be honest, she couldn't believe that she would fall in love with someone so quickly. She knew it was wrong, but she still wanted to get closer. Hood, when are you free? Let's go celebrate together that you finally got rid of that public opinion. Wanda couldn't hold back her joy any longer, and her little feet shook even more. At this moment, she didn't look like the nearly invincible Scarlet Witch, but a little girl. Wanda, the night after tomorrow, shall we go out for dinner together? Wanda quickly tapped on her phone keyboard and sent the message out. The reason why she chose the night after tomorrow was because she had a press conference tomorrow that she needed to attend. Otherwise, she didn't want to wait even a moment. Hood, no problem. See you the day after tomorrow, my little witch. Yes. Wanda clenched her fists and cried out in surprise. She would be able to see Hood the day after tomorrow. After looking at Hood's photo again, she reluctantly put her phone aside. But unlike before, she fell asleep contentedly. Should I be honest with Hood, confess my heart? This was Wanda's last thought before she fell asleep. Hood on the other side also put down his phone at this time. After a busy day today, it's time to have a good rest. Tomorrow I promised to accompany Gwen to visit his father. The next day, early in the morning. Ding dong. The copper bell on the oak door of the English coffee shop on the street in New York rang slightly. A familiar figure appeared in the shop. Hodder, my dear old friend, I miss you so much. Uncle Crew, who was wiping the table, greeted Hodder happily when he saw him appear. Uncle Crew, I think you don't miss me, you miss the money in my pocket. Hodder sat on the familiar chair and said with a smile. How can you say that? I think you are a very interesting person. Although Uncle Crew was touched by what he said, he still waved his hand and said, What would you like to drink today? Let's keep it the same as before, Hodder said casually. After a while, Uncle Crew had already placed the Blue Mountain coffee in front of Hodder. Ding, you tasted premium Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. Reward, 100,000 United States dollars. The TV hanging on the wall was playing a news. Last night, someone reported that the underground emperor Jinping was beaten and seriously injured. At present, our station is still paying close attention to this incident. The media is really bold nowadays. They even dare to spread rumors about Kingpin. Is there anyone in New York who dares to touch Kingpin? Uncle Crew stroked his dense beard and cursed angrily. Underground emperor. Hodder glanced at the news and turned his attention back to the coffee being stirred and swirled. You also think it's unreasonable, right? Uncle Crew returned to the front desk and laughed loudly. Hood smiled, but didn't say anything. Instead, he looked out the door from time to time. He didn't stop stirring the silver spoon until a beautiful figure appeared from the window. Dingling. As the oak door was pushed open, the sun shone into the store, and the energetic figure walked in. This youthful and active person was Gwen. She was wearing a light white plaid coat in British style and quickened her pace to Hood. The wind was mixed with the smell of orange perfume. Mr. Hodder. Gwen raised her lips and greeted Hodder. You look so beautiful today. Hodder was amazed by Gwen's dress and did not hesitate to praise her. Thank you. Gwen met Hoard's gaze. She put her hands behind her back, her mind full of yesterday's scene. She was also bold yesterday. Uncle Crew, give me a cup of Bond coffee. Hod shouted to Uncle Crew, then smiled and looked at Gwen. Sit down first, the coffee here is delicious. As a veteran in the flower field, he knew that in many cases, he should not ask, but decide directly. This can further enhance the charm of men. Yeah. Gwen carefully sat down opposite Hood. You weren't so restrained yesterday, you were much braver than now. Hodder looked at Gwen and couldn't help but teasing her. Gwen's face flushed instantly. She looked at the coffee and quickly took a sip. However, she couldn't help but gasp because it was so hot. She lowered her head. After all, she knew that she was too impulsive. Although Hood was indeed handsome, it was too offensive to do that. I won't tease you anymore. After we finish our coffee, let's go to the hospital to visit Mr. Stacy. Hodder didn't continue to tease Gwen, but got down to business. Then, instruments and equipment. Gwen had just noticed that Hod didn't bring any equipment. No equipment is needed, go and have a look first. Hodder shook his head. Just going to take a look. Gwen was a little disappointed. She thought Hood had the skills to treat her father. Because Hood brought her too many surprises. Street. John's Hospital in Queens. This is the best hospital in Queens, and there are many people coming and going every day. Gwen, over here. As soon as they arrived at the hospital corridor, Gwen's mother Helen called out to Gwen. She had been waiting here early today. Mom. Gwen quickened her pace and brought Hood to Helen. Helen looked at the young man next to Gwen and asked, Who is this? Mom, this is Mr. Hood. Gwen hurriedly introduced Hood. She had told Helen yesterday that she would bring someone to help her father with his medical treatment today. Helen looked at Hodder up and down, with a slightly strange expression. This guy didn't look like a doctor, too young, and very noble. Mom, I'll take Hood in first. Gwen quickly pulled Hood in and explained, Don't mind, my mom is worried about my dad, heartbroken. It's okay. Hodder didn't take it to heart, but looked at the figure on the bed. George looked pale and seemed to have been unconscious for a long time. He has been in a coma for more than half a year. Gwen's eyes were red. Helen, who followed in, hugged Gwen and asked, Do you think he can wake up? Uncle is in a very bad condition. Normally, He may never wake up. Hodder made a judgment after just 2 glances. This made the mother and daughter pale and extremely sad. He changed the subject and said, "But, Buzz." Hord's palm flickered with light, but the two of them didn't notice this subtle movement. But in the next second, cough, cough, cough. George on the bed suddenly coughed violently, his eyes suddenly widened, he gasped for breath, and looked confused. Seeing this sudden scene, the mother and daughter were stunned at first, and tears suddenly burst out. "Dad, dear." Gwen and Helen rushed over to hug George with tears in their eyes. Hod stood behind with a smile on his face, watching the family reunion. The horse rune flashed on his palm. Outside the ward, Gwen said with tears in her eyes, choking with sobs, "Hodder, thank you." She never dreamed that her father would wake up one day. Moreover, after the doctor's diagnosis, it was found that this was not just waking up. Even the muscles that had atrophied due to long-term bed rest had recovered, and his physical characteristics were even healthier than before. After subsequent confirmation, he was able to be discharged directly from the hospital. Even the doctor called it a medical miracle. It has never happened in the medical field. "You're welcome. It's your father who's lucky. I didn't do anything." Hodder shook his head. "I know it's you." Gwen's nose turned red. She knew very well that this was not a miracle, because her father woke up only after Hood came here. Although she was not sure how this was done, she knew very well that it was all thanks to Hood. She said a little immaturely, "Are you free tomorrow? I would like to invite you to dinner." Then the girl added, "This is a way for my father to express his gratitude to you. When he gradually adapts, we will arrange a more grand banquet to thank you properly." Tomorrow. Hodder was stunned for a moment, and a plump figure in red popped up in his mind. It didn't matter whether Gwen's parents invited guests or not, as long as Gwen treated them. "I have an appointment with Wanda for dinner tomorrow night. If I reject Gwen, I might miss the best opportunity. Are you busy tomorrow?" Gwen noticed the tangled look on Hood's face and said, "I want to thank you tonight, but my father is busy." Because she still needs follow-up examinations, she can't spare the time. "No problem." After a moment, Wanda nodded with a bright smile. "A real man never makes choices. I want them all. See you tomorrow night." A gust of fragrant wind blew in, Gwen's tender lips quickly touched Hood's face, and ran away quickly with a red face. Watching Gwen trotting back to the ward, Hood's mouth corners involuntarily rose. Is this the breath of youth? He is already looking forward to dinner tomorrow night. Ding. With your kindness, and your boundless love, you healed George Stacy. Get reward. Artificial Intelligence Red Queen. Artificial Intelligence Red Queen, an artificial intelligence from the Resident Evil universe. She is everywhere in the Earth's network system. You can call her directly. Artificial Intelligence Red Queen. Hodder was delighted. He had never thought that he would receive this reward. Red Queen is a powerful artificial intelligence, at least more powerful than all the artificial intelligences on Earth at this stage of Marvel. Take Ultron for example, he is far inferior to Red Queen in terms of intelligent calculations. Because Red Queen already has her own consciousness, coupled with a huge network, her functions are extremely terrifying. Red Queen. Hod put on the headset he carried with him to call. Now Red Queen is already online and can be called at any time. "Master, I am here." Red Queen's firm voice came from the headset. It was the voice of a little girl. "Help me retrieve a copy of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s confidential documents and files related to the Cosmic Cube. The reason for doing that is to test the strength of Red Queen. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s security wall is the most powerful in the entire United States. Once you can get these top-notch information, it means that Red Queen can penetrate every hole in the world network. Master, the intrusion has been successful, and the information you want has been obtained." Just a moment later, the Red Queen's voice sounded from the headset. Hood's phone vibrated. It was clearly the file of the S.H.I.E.L.D. Cosmic Cube. The level was 9. It was the second highest top-secret level of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because the top-secret files of the highest level 10 are paper archives that cannot be hacked into. "It seems that you are quite capable." Hod slid twice casually and nodded secretly. Possessing artificial intelligence means that any device connected to the network cannot monitor him. Recently, his actions have gradually become conspicuous. It is estimated that it will not be long before S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra will notice him. After leaving the hospital, knock, Knock, knock. Hod just returned to the Cayenne and heard someone knocking on the car window. Turning around, the person outside the car window was Tony Stark wearing sunglasses. Hod, it's really you. As the car window rolled down, Tony looked surprised. Are you sick? Why didn't you contact me? I have the best medical team. He had noticed this Cayenne just now. After all, there was only one Cayenne of Hod's in the whole of New York. No, I just came to visit a friend. Hod shook his head and spread his hands, and asked with a smile, why is the chairman of Stark Corporation here? He really didn't expect that Tony would appear in St. John's Hospital. Street. John's Hospital is already top-notch, but it can't compare with Tony's medical team. Tony sighed and walked around to the passenger seat, opened the door and sat in directly. I'm here to visit the injured civilians in Sokovia. He smiled self-deprecatingly. Sorry. Hod looked at Tony's bitter expression and knew that Tony was in a lot of pain. But he didn't expect Tony to come to the hospital in person. No need to apologize. Tony smiled bitterly, shook his head and sighed. If it wasn't my fault, it wouldn't have turned out like this. His decision had harmed too many people, which made him feel extremely guilty. And, Tony paused and then said, if it weren't for Wanda, I wouldn't have the face to see the wounded. He knew very well that the reason their reputation was slightly restored was entirely due to Wanda. However, I see that Wanda's approval rating has also risen sharply. You should be out of the spotlight now. Hodder has also noticed this matter. It must be said that this time it has directly restored the previous image. Recently, there has been a lot less negative news about the Avengers. Yeah, Tony lowered the passenger seat a little, and sighed with concern, but this matter doesn't seem to be that simple. What's wrong? Any other questions? Hodder could see that Tony's face was full of worry. Wanda is hiding something from us, and someone is helping her. Of course I understand this is a good thing, but she doesn't trust us and hasn't told anyone. Tony said what he was most worried about. This person must be extraordinary to be able to change Wanda. And he was more worried about whether this person had other intentions for the Avengers. During this period of time, he was basically trying to find a way to investigate the identity of this mysterious person. Master, after testing, Tony Stark is investigating Wanda's news, which may involve you. At this time, the voice of Red Queen came from the headset. Investigating. Hood was stunned, but soon understood. Tony has always been a man of action. He probably started investigating when he knew about this. However, he did not expect Wanda to not reveal the relationship between them. Hood turned his head and looked at Tony with a sad expression on his face. He wanted to tell him, but finally thought forget it. He needs to respect Wanda's choice. Maybe she feels that it is not the right time yet. Don't worry too much, Tony. Hodder patted Tony on the shoulder and said, maybe Wanda is waiting for the right time. The right time. Tony was stunned for a moment, and turned to look at Hord with doubt. She trusts you and may need to adapt. Rushing will only make the situation worse. After hearing Hood's explanation, Tony hesitated for a moment, and finally nodded slightly. What Hood said made sense. If he pushed too hard, Wanda might be disgusted. Because this is Wanda's privacy anyway. Hodder, thank you. I'll treat you to dinner some other day. I'm too busy lately. After Hodder's persuasion, Tony finally decided to listen to Hodder. When he returned, he asked Pepper to stop investigating. No problem. Huoda smiled and responded. He didn't expect that so many people would invite him to dinner recently. Central Avenue in New York. It's okay, I'll contact you later. Hod sat by the door of the Cayenne and shook his phone. This was the third time a beautiful woman came to him and asked to add him on Facebook. He couldn't help but sigh that a good car is really attractive. Dingling. The phone in his hand vibrated. Wanda. Hood, when are you free? Hood saw the message and his mouth curled up slightly. He really can't wait. Hodder, you are such a greedy little cat, do you want to eat it so much? Wanda. Stop talking nonsense. When are you free? I can reserve a seat. On the other side, Wanda was looking at the crimson clothes in the closet in her room. When she saw the message, her cheeks became slightly hot and she couldn't help but squeeze her legs together. Hod hesitated and tapped his phone. Hod. About 8 o'clock in the evening. Wanda. Okay, see you at St. Iz's restaurant tonight. Hod. Okay. Wanda replied to the message, her mouth raised, humming a song. Looking at the dazzling array of clothes, she finally focused her attention on a set of semi-transparent lace innerwear. Mr. Hood, who had just replied to the message, was about to put his phone away when his right shoulder was suddenly tapped. He turned around and saw that it was the lovely Gwen. When he noticed what Gwen was wearing, he couldn't help but be stunned. Gwen, who had fair skin, was wearing a well-tailored pure white shirt today. The slightly open collar revealed her snow-white and slender neck. Her short hair was as smooth as silk, and she looked heroic yet beautiful, which further highlighted her fair complexion. The thin shirt made her figure stand out, and the long-term career symbol made him admire her style. Although her figure was not as explosive as Wanda's, her youthful cuteness made him a little eager. "You're here." Although Wanda was in a state of turmoil, he remained calm on the surface and put his phone in his pocket. What was Mr. Hood busy with just now? He seemed very absorbed in his work. In fact, Gwen noticed not far away that Hood seemed to be replying to some messages. "Nothing, just arrange things for tonight." Wanda's expression was calm, and he didn't even blink when he mentioned this matter. "By the way, your outfit today is very nice." After all, as a good man who has walked through a sea of flowers without getting a single leaf on him, he is very familiar with changing the subject. Really, Gwen was really attracted by this sentence, and she turned around in a circle with excitement. She bent slightly to show her figure. In order to keep the appointment today, she spent more than an hour just choosing clothes. Looking at Gwen's beauty, Hod couldn't help but secretly sigh that she was simply a walking clothes rack, and she could handle any style. "What's wrong with Mr. Stacy?" Hodder coughed lightly and shifted his gaze. "Although good wine is good, don't drink too much. Thanks to Mr. Hodder, Dad is back to normal and can go back to the police station." Gwen mentioned this with an excited smile on her face. After confirming that there was no problem yesterday, her father couldn't wait to go back and test the gun. And the police station also agreed to let her father go back to work. For her father, this is the happiest news. "By the way, where are we going to eat?" Because Gwen was treating us today, Hodder didn't book a restaurant. "Can we take a walk outside first?" For some reason, Gwen did not answer Hood's question, but asked with her hands behind her back, blinking her big eyes. Hood glanced at the time on his watch and nodded slightly. "All up to you. It's only 6 o'clock in the evening. If the arrangements are appropriate, there is still time. Come with me." Gwen smiled happily, took Hood's hand and walked quickly forward. When she made this move, her cheeks were slightly hot, but she did not let go. She pulled Hood all the way, crossed several streets and came to a forest park. It is autumn now, and there are a large number of maple trees planted in the forest park. The light of the setting sun shines through the leaves to form a Tyndall effect, and beams of light shine on the ground covered with maple leaves. The yellow leaves form a forest, and the afterglow of the sunset shines. The two people stepped on the piled-up fallen leaves and made a rustling sound. The two sat on the wooden bench in the park and watched the sunset slowly setting in the sky. "The scenery here is really nice." Hodder looked up at the fallen leaves in the breeze and sighed. He rarely came to Queens, and this was the first time he knew there was such a beautiful scenery here. The scenery is pleasant and the beauty is even more pleasant. In the setting sun, Gwen looked even more charming. "Yeah." Gwen took a deep look at Hood beside her and said, "I like it here very much. I come here almost every day." Only by coming to the park can she temporarily escape the depressed emotions in her heart. "I thought people in Queens had long since grown tired of the scenery here." Hodder turned his head and looked at Gwen and said jokingly, "During the time when my dad was in a coma, I would always come here alone and stare blankly when I was depressed." Gwen and Hood's eyes intertwined, and she opened her red lips slightly. "But my mood now is completely different from before, everything is finally getting better." At that time, she had to work to supplement the family income, and she also had to fight crime to uphold justice in her heart. Basically, she had no time for herself. Only when the sun went down, she would take a few minutes to enjoy the sunset here. Now that she is finally getting better, she even feels like she is dreaming. "As long as you stay optimistic, many things will be fine." Hodder smiled and rubbed Gwen's head, with a slight smile on his face. In fact, he also knew that Gwen had endured enough. To put it bluntly, Gwen was just a student now. At this moment, accompanied by a fragrant breeze, a soft body suddenly fell into his arms. The fresh citrus scent entered Hodder's lungs with his breath. He looked at himself. The warm and soft jade in his arms was stunned for a moment. He really didn't expect that Gwen would rush over to him at this time. For a moment, the air was blocked, and neither of them spoke. Hood hugged Gwen and felt this warm time. Did you bring a gun with you when you went out? Gwen said in an awkward tone after an unknown amount of time. Hodder's expression suddenly became a little embarrassed. It's okay, it's normal to carry a gun when going out. Oh, Gwen did not leave, but hugged Hood tightly with red ears. Let's go eat. Hood looked at the time and said awkwardly. Yeah. Gwen nodded slightly and took the initiative to shake Hood's hand. Hood asked, by the way, where is the restaurant you were looking for? It's nearby, we'll be there soon. Gwen took Hood's hand and walked out of the park. Feeling the warmth in her hand, she suddenly felt mixed emotions. By the way, Hood, you and Wanda are very familiar with each other. Have you known each other for a long time? She had actually thought of this yesterday, otherwise Wanda would not have come out alone with Hood. Very familiar, but only for a week. After saying this, Hood couldn't help but complain in his heart. She knew my strengths and weaknesses, and I knew hers. But he was telling the truth. After all, he had only known her for a week. However, because of the power of the Phoenix and Chaos magic, the two of them were very familiar with each other. You've only known each other for a week. Gwen was delighted to hear this. This was much better than she thought. After all, she herself didn't know what the relationship between the two was. Her intuition at the time was that the two seemed very close. Where is the restaurant you mentioned? Hodder stopped and looked around and asked. Here it is. Gwen pointed to a luxurious restaurant on the corner. The sign read, Street. Is Restaurant, St. Is. Hodder twitched his mouth and raised his eyebrows slightly. Wait, if I remember correctly, Wanda also booked this restaurant. How could it be such a coincidence? Huoda helplessly stroked his forehead and sighed slightly. What's wrong? Don't you like this restaurant? Gwen noticed Hood's actions and asked with a worried tone. She did her homework in advance. This is the most famous couples restaurant in New York. And the dishes are expensive. When she chose to book here, she felt painful for a long time. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be too bad, right? Nothing. Huoda forced a smile and shook his head. I just thought of something not so good. That's good. I thought you didn't like it here. Gwen patted her chest and breathed a sigh of relief. I thought Hood didn't like it. How could that be? As long as I have dinner with you, I'll be happy no matter where it is. Hodder held Gwen's hand tightly and looked at her with tender eyes. When Gwen met Hodder's eyes, her cheeks flushed and her eyes could not help but evade. Although she had clearly expressed her thoughts, she still felt extremely shy when facing Hodder's eyes. After all, she had never had someone she liked before. Well, come in. Gwen's voice was as soft as a mosquito, and she lowered her head and pulled Hood inside. An 18-year-old girl is easy to be coaxed. What's more, she is as white as paper. Hood raised his head, and his helpless expression became firm. Since you want to pursue excitement, you must carry it through to the end. The table was booked by the window along the street, and you can just see the scenery of the forest park outside when you sit here. The sky is slightly bright and red, and the setting sun is gradually setting. Looking at the lake in the park, the rippling lake surface under the setting sun is crystal clear. Passing travelers are facing the evening breeze, enjoying the brief comfort after get-off work. In the restaurant, the bands are performing Balladefouradline elegantly. The elegant music echoes in the restaurant. How is it here? The environment is pretty good. I specially booked a seat here, the view is beautiful. After Gwen sat down, she looked around curiously with her big eyes blinking, and asked excitedly. She had indeed been in and out of many large and elegant occasions, but those were when she was fighting evil or saving people. This was the first time she sat in such a restaurant like this. Dear Madam and Sir, here is the menu. The waiter in a tuxedo stood aside with the menu in his hand. Ladies first. Hodder nodded slightly with a smile on his face. Gwen took the menu and took a deep look at Hood, who was looking at his phone. The more she understood Hood, the more surprises he brought her. He was obviously an excellent person in all aspects, but he was still so humble and gentlemanly. Facing Gwen's gaze, Hood just smiled. He couldn't care about these things at all now, his attention was on his phone. Wanda, I'll go to St. Is to wait for you. Remember to come early. I've reserved a seat by the window. Although Hood's face was very calm, his fingers couldn't help tapping on the table. He really didn't expect Wanda to come early. He couldn't imagine what sparks would fly if Gwen and Wanda met. And he noticed as soon as he came in that this was a couple's restaurant. It would be difficult even to explain. And what's worse is that this also has a seat by the window. If she knows that he agreed to a date with her and also made an appointment with other girls, she will definitely be furious. Thinking of this, he had a headache. Do girls nowadays like to eat in the same place? Do you want to try the vegetarian soup and apple and carrot stew in this restaurant? The reviews online say that the taste is better than in Italy. Gwen opened the menu and handed it to Hood, asking with a hopeful look. This is a European-style restaurant with a variety of European dishes, mainly Italian and German. She wanted to eat here before, but she couldn't bear to do it, so she also wanted to try this dish. I think it should be good. I like everything you like. Hodder's mind was spinning rapidly as he spoke to Gwen. You are so nice. Gwen looked at Hood, who was smiling and nodding, and her heart warmed. This was completely in line with her thoughts. The more this was the case, the more moved she was. However, she did not notice that Hood's eyes were not on the menu at all. Now Hood has been thinking about how to avoid the two of them meeting as much as possible. After ordering, a blonde waiter soon brought the dishes up. Please enjoy your meal. After saying this, the waiter did not forget to light the candle in the middle before stepping back and leaving. Come and try it. Gwen looked at the delicious food with shining eyes. She loved trying all kinds of delicious food. Okay. Hood smiled and nodded, temporarily putting Wanda's matter behind him. It's still some time before Wanda comes, so we can only deal with it as it comes. Hood took a sip of the milky vegetable soup in front of him. The aroma was rich and complex, blending the freshness of fresh vegetables, the spiciness of spices, and the mellowness of cream. When you take the first bite, the smooth texture and rich layers of the soup unfold on the tip of your tongue. In the slight chill of autumn, after drinking it, you will feel warm all over. How is it? Gwen clenched her hands and waited for Hood's evaluation. Well, very good, the chef must be from Italy. Hodder nodded slowly and gave his evaluation. That's good, it seems this restaurant is really good. Gwen breathed a sigh of relief. She always thought that a wealthy man like Hood must have very picky tastes. But it seems that he is not the kind of spoiled person. But, at this moment, Wanda changed the subject. But what? Gwen's heart, which had been at ease, suddenly lifted up at this moment. But it's not as good as mine. Hodder was not kidding when he said this. He has system rewards. His cooking skills are also top-notch. He can even tell how much seasoning the other person has used by just taking a sip of the food with his tongue. Can you cook? Gwen never thought that Hood could actually cook. He was already so talented, but he didn't even lose his life skills. Naturally, I am very precise about seasonings. For example, this dish uses hand-ground black pepper and parsley. Wanda was serious and began to explain how to cook well. Ding, you tasted the best vegetable soup. Get reward. Master cooking skills. It's good to have a system. However, Gwen listened very carefully and stared at Hood. The slightly swaying candlelight illuminated Hood's handsome face. Hood's serious explanation made Gwen's eyes stare straight. She didn't even notice what Hood was saying, but just nodded subconsciously. For her, serious boys are really handsome. Especially those who know everything but never have any arrogance. If I could really be with him, I would definitely be very happy, right? Gwen's mind suddenly popped up a picture of the two of them together. Thinking of this, her cheeks couldn't help but get slightly hot. This was the first time she felt inferior. Although she was very powerful, she was far behind Hood. Why is your face so red? Hood found Gwen in a daze and subconsciously touched her face. The moment he touched her face, Gwen suddenly came back to her senses. She felt the warmth on her face, and her heartbeat accelerated instantly. She could even hear her own heartbeat. Is that so? Gwen shook her head quickly, her eyes panicking. Maybe the vegetable soup is too hot. I thought you were drinking behind my back. Hodder didn't expose Gwen's lie, and said with a smile, it's a pity that I have to drive later and can't order any wine. No. Gwen's voice was as soft as a mosquito. She was at a loss at this moment. No, Gwen Stacy, how can you be so weak? Watch it if you want. Didn't you take the initiative to hug him and even kiss him? Even if I go, it doesn't matter if I go. Gwen encouraged herself frantically, but the more she thought about going down, the more confused her mind became. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the direction of the store entrance. Hodder. This familiar voice was cold and charming at the same time. Hod looked up suddenly and saw a woman in a scarlet windbreaker standing at the front desk. Even with a mask on, he could still recognize that it was Wanda. That windbreaker and that figure were so recognizable. The name I reserved as Hod Fernandez. At the front desk, Wanda took out her phone and showed the screen to the waiter. However, she did not notice that there was a gaze focused on her. Why is she here? Hodder was a little embarrassed. If Wanda looked over here, she would definitely see him and Gwen. He couldn't imagine what the scene would be like. Wanda would definitely get mad. After all, it was fine for them to date two people at the same time, but in the same restaurant. No, think of a solution quickly. Just go, it's not polite to Wanda. Tiger charm. No, this thing will split your personality into two. He really didn't expect it to be so fast. It took only more than 10 minutes for him to come. There is still more than half an hour before the meal starts. At this time, the waiter took Wanda to the stairs. From the looks of it, it should be a private room. Hood's hanging heart finally let go. This is also in line with Wanda's personality, and as a celebrity, it is impossible for Wanda to eat in public. Hodder, is someone calling you? Gwen noticed that Hodder's eyes were always on the back of her. She turned her head and was about to look behind her. At this moment, Hodder's scalp suddenly went numb. If Gwen saw Wanda now, she would most likely say hello. He knew that Gwen's idol was Wanda, and he would be really furious once he saw her. At this critical moment, Hodder held Gwen's face with both hands. The two looked into each other's eyes. This sudden action made Gwen stop her movements, and even her heartbeat almost stopped when she looked at the approaching face. This. She never expected that Hood would suddenly come over. Although this is a couple's restaurant, she has never been in a relationship before. Her cheeks turned red in an instant. Is he going to kiss her suddenly? Should she respond or be reserved? Because of the big movement, even the table creaked. At the same time, Wanda, who was about to go up the stairs, heard the sound coming from not far away. She looked over there with a puzzled look. Close your eyes. Hodder was not panicked at all, and stroked the girl's eyes with one hand. Okay. Gwen was stunned, her heartbeat accelerated. Is he going to kiss me? She slowly closed her eyes, even raised her chin slightly. She put on a look of waiting for you to pick her. At this moment, a green light emanated from the palm of Hood's right hand. A snake flashed in his palm, and he instantly became invisible. At this time, Wanda looked back and saw only a beautiful girl with her eyes closed. She didn't care too much, shook her head and walked upstairs. When Wanda turned around, Hood instantly lifted the invisibility and breathed a sigh of relief. He gently touched Gwen's eyelids and then sat back in her seat. Gwen didn't feel Hood's kiss for a long time. She only felt the touch on her eyelids and opened her eyes in confusion. There is hair on your eyelid, I helped you take it off. Wanda pretended to be calm and said, and did not forget to throw the missing hair on the ground. Oh, Gwen heard this, but she didn't know why she felt a little lost. Are you thinking about something wrong? Hodder grinned and said jokingly. No way, only you would think that way. Gwen's face flushed. Hood actually said what he was thinking. No, Wanda shook his head. I'm thinking about what dishes I should cook to entertain you when you come to my house. Really? This instantly attracted Gwen's attention. German cuisine, I like it very much, but I want to try your cooking myself. How about I treat you to some German sausages? Hodder smiled wickedly. That's the specialty of Bratwurst. Big sausage. Gwen pouted and thought hard. Do you have this dish? I can try it. She turned her eyes to Hood's face. She always felt that Hood's expression was not right, and it always felt bad. She didn't care too much. If it was Hood's, it should be delicious. The two chatted happily for another 10 minutes. Oh, I remember I have a meeting tonight. Hodder glanced at his watch and looked at Gwen with a slightly apologetic look. I'm afraid this is all we can do tonight. Well, I have to go to class tomorrow too. Gwen could only nod. Although she wanted to stay together, she knew the importance of career to a man. Let's go. Hodder took Gwen's hand and walked out naturally. When leaving the restaurant, he walked under the eaves for a while to avoid the sight of the upstairs. After arriving at the parking lot, Hodder drove Gwen downstairs. I'm going back. Gwen stood in front of Hodder and spoke reluctantly. Well, go back and have a good chat with your father, he must miss you a lot. Hodder nodded quickly. It was getting late now, so he had to go back quickly. If you have time, remember to look for me. The next second, Gwen hugged Hood's waist and put her head on Hood's chest. After a while, she ran upstairs with a red face. It's finally over. Wanda felt the remaining warmth in his arms and let out a long sigh. Ding, your relationship with Gwen is heating up. Get reward. Shadow Core, Ninja Core. Shadow Core, Ninja Core. You can summon the Ninja Core from the Shadow Core, and they obey the summoner completely. It's the Black Shadow Army. Hodder was extremely surprised. He never expected to get such a reward. It seems that little Gwen will become his lucky star. Ding dong. At this moment, Hodder's phone vibrated slightly. Wanda, are you almost there? I'm going to be late. Looking at the time, Hod's mouth twitched slightly. Wanda, there's a little traffic on the road, we'll be there soon. Wanda hurried back to the car and rushed to the restaurant quickly. 8:10. After getting off the car, Hood glanced at the time and shook his head helplessly. It seemed that his time management skills were not up to par, otherwise he should have been able to catch up. After tidying up his clothes, Hood walked into the restaurant. The waiter standing inside was stunned when he saw Hood coming in. How could the guest come back after just leaving? Hood ignored the waiter and went straight to the second floor. The moment he opened the door, he saw Wanda sitting by the window in a crimson dress. Is there a traffic jam on the road? If I had known I would have asked you out this afternoon. You must be very tired after driving for such a long time. Wanda saw Hood and pulled the stool next to her, with a look of heartache in her eyes. For having dinner with you, a little traffic jam is nothing. Hood shook his head slightly, and sat down next to Wanda without blushing or beating his heart. Isn't the scenery here beautiful? Wanda, who was beside him, waited for Hood to sit down and suddenly held his hand. When she held Hood's hand, the corners of her mouth couldn't help but rise. At this moment, she felt that it was great to have a loved one. Well, the scenery is beautiful. Hodder nodded, but unfortunately he had already seen it once. Every time I pass by here, I hope someone can accompany me to appreciate it. Wanda said as she leaned her head on Hood's shoulder, but the next moment she widened her eyes. Why do you smell like a girl's perfume? She clearly smelled perfume from Hood, and it was not a male perfume. Oh no, Hood's heart stopped beating instantly. He had just hugged Gwen, and the perfume smelled on him. He himself did not expect that Wanda would take the initiative to approach him tonight. I was in such a hurry just now that I bumped into a girl by accident. It must be the smell on her body. Hood forced himself to calm down and said casually. Oh, Wanda did not doubt it, but said, don't be so anxious next time, I can wait for you. Dong dong dong. The blonde waitress pushed open the door of the private room. You two, your dishes are ready. But when she looked up and saw Hood, she was stunned. Isn't this the customer who came in a hurry just now? When she saw Hood and Wanda leaning against each other, her eyes widened instantly. Hood suddenly felt that something was wrong. Is it over yet? She really wants to see the Scarlet Witch appear, right? Okay, hurry up and serve the other dishes. He waved his hand and urged, don't let it slip out later. But before the young lady left, she still left a meaningful look. Hood, what's wrong with you today? You seem a little strange. Wanda was keenly aware that something was wrong with Hood. Especially since she possessed chaos magic, she was more sensitive to the fluctuations of the mind. I just think I shouldn't be late for work. Hood held Wanda's hand tightly and looked into her eyes affectionately. It's okay, it's normal to have things to do. I'm glad you can come. Wanda looked into Hood's eyes, and her doubts disappeared without a trace at this moment. After all, Hood was so mysterious, it was normal for him to have things to do. Cheers, don't think about it, I hope you can get rid of those public opinions. Hodder raised his glass. Good. Wanda picked up the wine glass with a smile. She hadn't been so happy for a long time. After a few glasses of wine. Well, actually, I have one more thing to do tonight besides inviting you to dinner. Wanda's cheeks were rosy, her eyes were hazy and glowed with a faint scarlet light, and she stared at Hood with charm. She really had too many things to say in her heart. What's the matter? Hodder put down the red wine glass with a puzzled expression and turned to look at Wanda. When their eyes met, his heartbeat suddenly accelerated when he looked at that charming face. Wanda drank some wine, and her fair face looked like her code name, Scarlet, covered with a layer of pink, with an indescribable charm. For a moment, the air in the box was filled with the smell of hormones, and the eyes of the two were entangled and twisted. No one's eyes separated first, and everything around seemed to be quiet. What do you want to say? Hodder's Adam's apple rolled and he repeated it again. He looked into the witch's melancholy eyes. Under the faint orange light, her face seemed to be covered with a veil, which made people unable to resist further uncovering it. I don't know if it was because Wanda's body temperature rose, but the smell of perfume on her body became stronger at this time. The smell of tuberose mixed with the aroma of wine came to his face. Wanda opened her lips and tried to speak several times, but she couldn't. She wanted to express her feelings, but at this moment she felt fear. Because although they said that everything that should have happened had happened, it was progressing too fast. Ahem, it's not a big deal. Wanda finally backed off. She was still afraid. She was the first time she felt love. When facing love, she was just a little girl after all. She didn't even know how to speak. And the closer she got, the faster her heart beat. You can tell me anything you want to say. Hodder held Wanda's hand and said firmly, no matter what it is, I will stand firmly by your side. He could see that Wanda did have something to say, but she might not have said it because of her inferiority complex. No, facing the gentle and considerate Hood, Wanda shook her head, really not. Only she knew what she was worried about. She didn't know what the relationship between the two of them was. Although those things happened, the relationship was still not confirmed. She didn't know if Hood would leave her after she expressed her love. Just thinking about it made her feel terrified. The person she trusted the most now was Hood. If Hood left her, she couldn't imagine how painful it would be, but if she didn't speak up, she could keep going. Even if they would always maintain this shameful relationship. It was also for this reason that she never told the Avengers about Hood's identity. Because she didn't know how to tell others about Hood's identity. How about we go back and talk? Hodder looked at Wanda, who was salivating with desire, and was already a little bit overwhelmed with urge. He had been teased so many times today, and he was alone. A woman with fair skin, a perfect figure, and a rosy face was right in front of him. Not only did she not say anything, but she kept taking deep breaths. With every deep breath, Hood could feel the hot breath hitting his skin. He couldn't help but take a look at the abyss-like ravine. Wanda probably didn't know how good her figure was, and she even wore a red dress. Looking at the edge with a little crimson lace, he felt his blood boiling. Any man with normal function would find it difficult to resist the temptation at this moment. You're not allowed to leave. Wanda pouted and shook her head. Wine is strong in the first place, and the alcohol was already rising at this time. She didn't want Hood to go back like this, she wanted to stay with Hood. Wanda was obviously really drunk. Every word and action had the unique flavor of being drunk. But, Huoda took a deep breath, but the fragrance that poured into his lungs made him even more intoxicated. Can't you have a few drinks with me? Wanda hugged Hood's right hand, and suddenly a soft feeling came. She leaned against Hood and kept acting coquettishly, and her voice became extremely charming at this time. Hood suddenly found that Wanda after drinking was completely different from two people. The last time she was drunk, it was almost the same. One was melancholy but well-behaved. The other was melancholy but a little crazy. When she was about to shake, the suspenders of the red dress slid down her shoulders. The white and tender shoulders had an extremely perfect shape. Because of the large amplitude of the movement, Hood could even see the snow-capped mountains held by the lava. This perfect snow-capped mountain and lava are like the most beautiful scenery in the world. Under the movement of the lava, even the snow-capped mountains are constantly shaking at this time. It must be said that Wanda's figure is relatively thin, but she is indescribably plump. Just looking at this made Hood's breathing become heavier and heavier. He could even feel that Kunbang had undergone a huge change. Dizzy, Wanda poked Hoard's cheek with her fingertips, and then lay directly on the table. Wanda, who was drunk now, unbuttoned her windbreaker, and the thin lining inside supported the milky white snow. She lay on the table with a bit of playfulness. Wanda, sit down. Hodder looked at this seductive look and pulled her back with a heavy breath. No, I like to drink while lying down. Wanda waved her hand, took the bottle, and poured it into her mouth without hesitation. Puff, because she was lying down, the moment she drank it, it spurted out. The scarlet wine slid down her neck, and for a moment even the lining was wet. Depend on, Hod really couldn't help it. This was simply challenging his resistance. He was not Lu Shahui. Legend has it that the more powerful a witch is, the more beautiful she is, full of charm, attracting you everywhere. Wanda Maximoff is the legendary witch. Sometimes, even unintentional actions can lead people to commit crimes. Let's go back. Hod put Wanda's hand on his shoulder and prepared to help Wanda back. No, Wanda shook her head. She didn't want to go back to the room. She enjoyed being next to Hood. Only by being next to Hood could she do whatever she wanted. What do you want to do to make you willing to go back? Hodder looked at Wanda, who was drunk, and shook his head helplessly. Wanda forced herself to stand up straight with her weak legs and put her hands on Hoard's shoulders. You said you like. But before she could finish her words, she lost her balance and Wanda fell directly on Hoard's chest. It came at him. He was dribbling the ball and hitting someone. It was a foul. He couldn't stand it anymore. Hood raised his right hand in the air. It was the first time that he used the power of the Phoenix so smoothly. Bang! The door of the box was locked with a snap. Today I must show you the power of the Ox Talisman, the Monkey Talisman and the Rabbit Talisman. The next day, on the clean and comfortable big bed, the white body stretched out to its heart's content. The sun was shining brightly outside, and the room was filled with spring light. Aha! Wanda's eyelashes trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes. Her whole body felt like it was falling apart, and a feeling of soreness, pain, and comfort spread throughout her body. Wanda looked up and looked around the room, inside Hood's room. She knew at a glance that this was Hood's room. When she saw the mess scattered all over the floor, she couldn't help rubbing her temples. Although she had prepared herself mentally yesterday, she didn't expect to actually come to Hood's room. I remember that after I drank yesterday. When she thought of what happened yesterday, her face instantly turned red. Although she had thought that something exciting would happen, this was too exciting. Just thinking about it made her want to cover her face with something. It's so embarrassing. I was drunk, and Hood didn't stop me. When she thought of this, she couldn't help but want to kick Hood. That place didn't even stop her, and it chose the scene randomly, right? But where is that guy? Wanda rubbed her sore waist and gritted her teeth. This guy was so hateful that she wanted to pinch Hood. But no matter how she looked, there was no sign of Hood in the room. Could it be that he went out for something urgent? Wanda shook her head. After all, in her eyes, it was normal for Hood to deal with many things every day. Thinking of this, she supported her extremely tired body and got up to take a shower. She didn't dare to think about what kind of torture she had experienced last night to be so tired. After a busy night, her body was already sticky. Wanda came to the bathroom door with her body without a trace of fat and pulled the door. As soon as it was opened, a thick fog came over her face. Wanda looked at the empty bathroom and couldn't help muttering. Now many people's bathrooms have installed steaming equipment, so Wanda was not very surprised. Forget it. Wanda shook her head. Just as she walked in and was about to close the door, a figure came up from behind the door. She instantly recognized that the man was Hoard. I didn't expect that the little witch actually had a hobby of peeking at other people washing. There is a price to pay for breaking into the bathroom casually. Hodder's voice was low and very attractive just by listening to it. I didn't. Wanda's heartbeat accelerated, and she felt a burning sensation on her back. How did you get in? Haven't you had breakfast yet? Let me give you breakfast. Hood grinned and got closer, and could even feel his breath. Wanda met Hood's eyes, and her expression suddenly became extremely panicked. She didn't even know where to look, and she just met Hood's burning gaze. What breakfast? I don't want to eat breakfast. Wanda's face flushed and she shook her head repeatedly. She wanted to push him out but was pushed against the wall. Hood raised a playful smile and said, "If you are hungry, tell me. It's really rude to just rush in." "Who? Hungry? Don't talk nonsense." Wanda's earlobes were dyed red, and she looked like a completely different person from when she was drunk. But the more this happened, the happier Hood was. After all, even if you play League of Legends, you need to change the map occasionally. He was naturally very happy when he changed the map. If you are not hungry, why did you push the door open directly? Can't you knock? Hood looked at the snow mountain relentlessly, with ill intentions in his eyes. Since there is meat delivered to the door, as a wolf, he will not let it go. Especially he can smell the meaty aroma coming from the meat. Under the lingering white mist. That beautiful face that can be domineering or sweet, shyly blushed and tender, charming and attractive. A pair of wet eyes, deep and moist. She has just woken up and has a clear and pure look, and a kind of charm. The corners of her eyes are still tinged with seductive red. Maybe she is nervous at this time, and the corners of her charming lips are trembling. I'm going out first. Wanda tried to push Hood away. After all, she was very tired. She didn't want to continue. Fighting required a lot of effort. Although Hood was the main fighting force, the effective force was relative. You don't want to wash up. Hodder grabbed Wanda's wrist. As a gentleman, he must urge others to pay attention to cleanliness. Do you want me to die? Wanda panicked. What a joke. Yesterday was too crazy. Still coming, she couldn't help biting her lips. I have to say that Hood's figure is no joke. His abdominal muscles are well defined and very strong. No, there are actually many places where it can be used. Hodder raised a wicked smile. What do you mean? Wanda was stunned when she heard this, and her head didn't turn around. Just as the witch was stunned, Horde reached out his big hand and touched the corner of her lips. Woo woo woo. Wanda sad face omega oh omega. After a long time, in the restaurant. At the table, Hood looked at Wanda across from him. Wanda touched her rosy lips, tears glistened in the corners of her clear eyes, her pink and rosy face was charming and seductive. It was so embarrassing. Come, you must be hungry. Hodder handed over a cup of freshly heated pure milk with a wicked smile. Wanda felt sick and almost died directly from dry mouth. There was no taste at all. If you don't want it, forget it. There is a country that emphasizes nourishing like, so I have to nourish myself. Hodder drank the pure milk in the cup. Wanda looked at Hodder's expression and knew that he must have done it on purpose. She dared not look directly at pure milk in the future. Okay, no more jokes, I'll be more careful next time. Hodder stood up and rubbed Wanda's little head, smiling and saying, there won't be a next time. You can come by yourself next time. Wanda was ashamed and angry. This guy was actually thinking about the next time. If she did such a dirty thing once, she would regret it for the rest of her life. At this time, the servant came over and said, Sir, there are two middle-aged men in costumes outside who want to see you. Who? Hodder asked with a puzzled look on his face. In costume. He didn't seem to have invested in any movies. Maybe, he couldn't remember. After all, he had so many businesses under his control, and it was impossible for him to manage them every day. He claims to be Dr. Strange. The servant said in a puzzled tone. It turns out he's a magician, let him in. Hodder was surprised at how this guy came here. What did Dr. Strange want him to do? To accept him as a disciple. He didn't want to go to Kamartaj to be a wizard, and let him practice all day, not go out, and not get involved in the secular world. He might as well die. It turned out to be Stephen. Just now, Imelda told me that there was a magician, and I was wondering who it was. In the waiting room, Huod lit a cigarette and looked at Stephen sitting opposite with a surprised look. He really didn't expect that Stephen would come here to find him. Have you ever seen a magician as gentlemanly and handsome as me in any circus? Stephen leaned back in his chair and spoke with a little displeasure. This guy really could accurately make him unhappy every time he spoke. No, but your clothes are not very common. Hod looked at the floating cloak behind him and said teasingly, "This is my exclusive suit, how can it be common?" Stephen took a deep breath, and the sound seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. He really didn't expect this guy to be so irritating. He even suspected that this guy was deliberately teasing him. If it weren't for him wanting to maintain his gentlemanly demeanor, he would probably have taken action. "Stephen, be quiet," Wong on the side interrupted Stephen with a serious look. "We have something important to do this time." Stephen shut up awkwardly. They did have something important to do this time. There is no such thing as a visit to the temple. Tell me, what is the matter? Huoda also knew that if there was nothing wrong, these two people would never come here. "Have you ever heard of nightmares?" Stephen took a deep breath and his expression became serious. "Nightmare?" Hodder frowned slightly and said, "You mean, a demon who draws power from dreams?" The nightmare is a demon of unknown origin who can pull sleeping creatures into nightmares and torture them. Once in a nightmare, the nightmare is almost omnipotent. In addition, this demon is also proficient in magic. So once the other party is awake, they will send their men to attack them. If an ordinary person faces a nightmare, he will lose his will in just a moment. It is said that only gods and extremely powerful magicians can resist this kind of attack. The most terrifying thing is that the nightmare can absorb the fear of others and become stronger. I didn't expect you to know anything. I thought you had no interest in magic or anything like that. Stephen interrupted and teased Hood. "Wong, can you bring a quieter guy next time? This guy talks too much." Hodder ignored Stephen, but spread his hands and spoke to Wong helplessly. Stephen felt sick after hearing this. He took a deep breath and said, "We hope you can help us." He realized that if he continued to argue with Hood, he would never be Hood's opponent. This guy seemed to be proficient in all the disgusting words, and he didn't even repeat them. "What help? What does it have to do with this nightmare?" Hod was actually very curious about what exactly happened. Two great wizards actually needed his help. No matter what, this matter was definitely not simple. "What are you talking about? What nightmare, what magic or something?" Wanda walked down the stairs gracefully. She had been eavesdropping at the stairs just now, and now she couldn't help but ask. If it was about magic, she would also like to know about it. And she recalled that Hood also said that he could do magic. "Have you finished breakfast? Come and chat with me. This magician is quite interesting." Hodder greeted Wanda, and he did not forget to tease Stephen. Wanda slowly sat down on the sofa, and Hodder casually hugged Wanda's slender waist. Avengers. Stephen recognized Wanda's identity the moment she appeared. He really didn't expect that Wanda would appear here, and it seemed that she had a close relationship with this kid. "Boy, I really misjudged you. Now I have a new respect for you. This boy can actually hook up with one of the strongest Avengers. That's really amazing. Okay, tell me what you want to talk to me about." Hodder waved his hand unhappily and brought the conversation back to the point. After all, he was really curious about what they wanted to talk to him about. And he was also quite interested in this nightmare. To be honest, it was quite interesting. "I have a spell here that I need your help to break, otherwise we won't be able to find Nightmare's apostle in the mortal world." Stephen straightened his body and opened his right hand while speaking. The bag beside him floated up out of thin air, and a parchment scroll slowly floated on the table and slowly unfolded. From the appearance, this parchment scroll has a long history, and there are many complex and strange runes on the yellowed leather surface. Looking for the apostle of Nightmare. Hod also knew that Nightmare could not directly descend to the mortal world, that is, the earth. Therefore, the apostle in the mortal world was needed as a medium. So as long as the apostle was dealt with, Nightmare would not be able to directly contact the mortal world. "We have been worrying about this spell for 2 days and 2 nights. Wang Zhuangshuo moved on the sofa and looked at the parchment scroll. No matter what method they used, they could not break it. So he suddenly remembered the miracle that day. "I only knew about this spell this morning, but Wang insisted on coming to you, otherwise I should be able to do it myself." Stephen couldn't help but refute at this time. In fact, when he saw the spell, he already knew how difficult it was. If he were to crack it, it would take at least several weeks, because there are too many things involved. Don't look at it as just a small spell, it contains too much information. If you are not good at it, practice more. If you can't afford it, don't play it. Hodder glanced at Stephen with disdain. Buzz. Hodder was seen holding a cigarette, pinching the spell with both hands, and looking at the spell on the table with a serious expression. With top talent, he understood the logic of the spell at a glance. And the next second, a huge magic circle flashed around, and the dark black mark spread rapidly on the ground. A gloomy and terrifying power emanated from the magic circle, and the strange black gas floated towards the sky. In just a moment, a black star map was formed on the ceiling. A bright star mark appeared on the star map, which clearly pointed out the direction. It's solved. Hod picked up the cigarette and flicked the ash slightly, as if he had done something insignificant. Question mark exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark. Stephen and Wang looked at each other, their eyes filled with disbelief. They originally thought it would take a long time, but it was solved in just one glance. Just one glance and it was solved. What kind of top pervert is this? The two were stunned for a long time, and neither of them spoke. Hurry up and leave. Huoda waved his hand unhappily. Don't waste my time enjoying life. Bang. The two stood outside the gate, their hair messy in the wind. Fine snowflakes floated in the air and slowly fell on a brown eaves. Looking around, a dojo was covered with snow, but there was no snow on the ground in the courtyard. This is the holy place where white magicians practice, Kamar Taj. In the reception room of the dojo, the fragrance of tea spread in the cold air. The tea in the cup exuded a thick mist. Ji Yuyi sat cross-legged in front of a tea table and slowly placed the teacup in front of Stephen and Wang opposite. Have you used that spell to test him? Ji Yuyi focused his eyes on the purple clay teapot in front of him and slowly scraped off the tea residue on the tea. He seemed not to care much about this matter while speaking, and his eyes were full of calmness. Well, although I can't believe it, he did it. Stephen was not as unruly as before in front of Ancient One, but had a serious expression. Wang, who was sitting cross-legged, poured tea into the teacup, drank it all, and then said, he solved it perfectly. It must be said that when he saw it today, he was shocked for a long time. Even when they were taken out of the door, they didn't come back to their senses for a long time. This is simply the most talented wizard he has ever seen in the world. Ji Yuyi nodded slightly, and poured the tea into most of Wang's cup before withdrawing her hand. She raised her hand slightly, and with a light wave, the spring water in the old bucket beside her poured into the kettle like a silver thread. Then she placed the kettle on the stove with a slightly dim flame. With a hook of her finger, the dim flame instantly burst into flames. The sparks slowly floated into the air along with the heat and disappeared. Master, I don't understand why you want to test him with this spell. Stephen couldn't help asking. After all, Ancient One rarely does meaningless things. Logically speaking, there must be a reason for her to do so. But he couldn't figure out why she did that. This spell is rarely known to outsiders and is extremely difficult. Ordinary mages need to learn the basics for more than 10 or 20 years before they can comprehend it, and Horde is only 24 this year. When he said this, there was a subtle flash of amazement in Ji Yuyi's eyes. She had to admit that even she needed a long time to use this spell at that time. But according to the description of the two, he only took a few glances and understood the operation steps of this spell. In various senses, this is the most terrifying genius she has ever seen. Although Ji Yuyi had no expression on his face, Stephen was still very keen to notice the change in Ji Yuyi's expression. You mean, is he really gifted? Stephen didn't want to admit it, but this was the fact in front of him. He couldn't do it, but Hood did it so easily. This was an indescribable blow to him. Ji Yuyi poured the boiling water into the newly replaced tea leaves, and the mist rose like a dragon. Although it was just one word, her tone was full of determination. Should we recruit him into Kamar Taj? The king, who had been mostly silent, suddenly spoke up. They needed such power, and this person's future must be limitless. If they could recruit him, it would definitely be a good thing for them, Kamar Taj. Not for now. Ji Yuyi shook his head slightly, looked at the tea leaves boiling in the hot water and said, I have my own arrangements, you go back first. The two stood up respectfully and saluted before standing up. Wang waved his right hand violently, and the dimensional door appeared in front of the two. The Statue of Liberty appeared in the other end. After the two crossed over, the dimensional door disappeared like a stream of light. After the two left, the calm expression on Ji Yuyi's face gradually became solemn. She closed her eyes and adjusted her breathing, and drank the tea in the cup. After doing all this, she sat cross-legged with her hands naturally on her legs. Buzz. As her eyes slowly closed, as the golden light wrapped around, the eye of Agamotto on her chest floated up. The next second, a dazzling light burst out from the eye of Agamotto. Puff! But at this moment, Ji Yuyi suddenly spat out a mouthful of scarlet blood. Even the antique coffee table in front of her was stained with blood. She widened her eyes and murmured with worry on her face, "I can't see the future of Hood." Just now she tried to use the time stone to spy on the future. But no matter in the past or the future, she did not see the existence of Hood on the timeline. This left only two possibilities. The first was that Hood had transcended the timeline, and the second was that there were special restrictions that hid him. But for the world, it was unknown whether these two possibilities were good or bad. Because Hood now seemed to exist only in the present. No matter what happened, there was no way to predict it. Ji Yuyi's eyes were full of fatigue. "Hope everything is fine. My time is running out." New York, in the garden of the manor. Ding. You have been noticed by Ancient One and have successfully passed the assessment. Reward. Scroll of Sithorn, fragmented. It's a test indeed. When he heard the prompt, Hood was not surprised at all. Because Stephen and Wong suddenly appeared and said that they couldn't solve the spell. He had already guessed that it was most likely sent by the Ancient One to test him. Because even if they couldn't solve the spell, they should have looked for the Ancient One first. If they didn't come to him, there was only one possibility left, which was what happened in the temple library last time. With the character of the Ancient One, he would send someone to test him sooner or later. Ancient One, I guess he has begun to take me seriously. Hodder muttered to himself as he watched the leaves falling in the distance. He was not afraid of Ancient One, as his current strength was evenly matched with that of Ancient One. If it came to a protracted war, Ancient One might not be as good as him. But he did not have any hatred for Ancient One. After all, this old guy was dedicated to protecting the Earth. There was no need to go over and find fault with him, not to mention that they were in the same camp. Just don't bother me. Hod shook his head. He was just thinking about lying down and enjoying himself. The reason he wanted to become stronger was just to keep some self-protection power for himself. What's more, if the Earth was gone, where would he go to play? It's impossible for him to go to play with the purple potato spirit, right? Wanda, what are you doing? Hodder retracted his thoughts and looked at Wanda in the living room. At this time, Wanda was lying on the sofa, swinging her white and tender feet, which made people unable to move their eyes away. Especially the dark sofa, which made her skin look even whiter, and the exposed toes were pink and tender, which was particularly beautiful. Even if he was not a foot control, he couldn't help but take a few more glances. Don't look at my feet with your trembling eyes. Although Wanda didn't get up, she knew what Hood was looking at. You can't blame me for that. It was you who took the initiative to hook the stone and stab me. Huoda looked innocent. Pervert, you are even interested in feet. Wanda curled her toes. It really is a change of weather. I am interested in your whole body. Hood smiled and said, and there are many things you can do with your feet and legs. Ding ding ding. Just as he was about to continue teasing Wanda, Wanda's cell phone on the table suddenly rang. Shish, it's the Basie's call. Wanda and Hood made a shushing gesture before answering the call. But after a while, her face immediately became extremely solemn. What? Got it, I'll go to support you right away. Wanda got up quickly after saying that. Who? Hodder came to Wanda and asked. Wanda took a deep breath and said solemnly. On North Street in Manhattan, a mutation event occurred. In the northern neighborhood of Manhattan, there was a loud bang. A car suddenly exploded, and the force of the explosion even shattered the glass on the street nearby. The debris piled nearby was also ignited by the flames, and the smelly black smoke slowly rose. Help, there's a monster. Why haven't the Avengers come yet? Don't smash my beloved car that I just paid off the loan for. Can someone help me find my child? Quote. The streets were filled with screams and howls from the people. Fear was reverberating in the air above this block. 3 bulls with horns and thick hair were rampaging around the streets. They destroyed everything they passed by, even the streets on the side were completely overturned. The crowds fled in all directions. Although they tried their best to escape, many people still suffered. The police from the nearby blocks rushed here as soon as possible and began to evacuate the people. Quick, run this way. Get out of here, don't stay. Quote. They were all trying their best to help evacuate the crowd, but even so, many people still couldn't evacuate. Especially in the shops on the roadside, many people hid directly in fear. But the fragile glass doors could not protect them at all. Moo! The bull man bent down, roared and rushed towards the police car not far away. Every time he took a step, he would leave deep hoofprints on the ground. Looking at the bull man rushing towards them quickly, the police suddenly changed their faces. The police immediately shifted into reverse gear and stepped on the accelerator. However, because there were too many vehicles here, they crashed into the car after driving for less than 10 meters. Quick, fight back. Seeing this scene, the faces of the policemen in the car were full of fear. Although they wanted to draw their guns, at such a close distance, they could only watch in fear as the bull man got closer and closer. At this moment, a pure white figure fell and blocked the bull man. Boom! The cyclone vibrated and roared loudly. The moment the two collided, a huge energy burst out, and even the dust swept around was rippling. It's Ghost Spider. The police in the car immediately recognized the identity of the white figure. When they saw the Ghost Spider appear, they finally put their minds at ease. Get out of here, let me deal with these big guys. Gwen, who was holding the horns tightly with both hands, said with a voice that seemed to be squeezed out from between her teeth. These guys are really strong. Gwen couldn't help but curse in her heart. These guys were far beyond her expectations. The policeman took a deep look at Gwen, turned around and drove away from the sidewalk without saying a word. Ha! Gwen took a deep breath, twisted his hips and waist, and threw the bull in front of him away. Moo! At this moment, the other two bulls rushed over here with all their strength. Seeing the two bulls getting closer and closer, Gwen jumped up confidently. Just like a top gymnast, her extremely resilient waist was like a crescent moon. At this moment, the bull had already rushed over from below and crashed heavily into the shop next to it. Hey, it's really rude of you to sneak attack. Don't you have any tutors? After landing, the playful Gwen did not forget to tease. Moo! The barbarian bull walked out of the store and howled to the sky. Yelling is enough to destroy public property. Gwen crossed his arms and raised his head slightly. The next second, 3 barbarians came running at him, shattering the ground, and rushed towards Gwen together. Do you really have the nerve to bully a little girl like me? Although you are bulls, you still have to respect the old and the young and be polite. While speaking, Gwen felt the ground was shaking slightly, and the eyes on her spider mask suddenly widened. She sprayed out spider silk and quickly pulled herself into the air. At the same time, her left hand quickly shot out spider silk and wrapped it around the 3 bulls. The invincible spider silk was easily torn off by the bulls at this time. It could only delay it for a few tenths of a second. Faced with this scene, Gwen could only move quickly upstairs. Then she continued to shoot out spider silk, but even so, she couldn't stop the bulls for too long. You guys are too strong, why don't you go plow the fields? Gwen looked at the troublesome bull man and couldn't help but mutter. Moo! The bull man couldn't catch Gwen and went crazy, with strange black air in his eyes. What's going on? Gwen was stunned when she saw the black gas coming out. It was the first time she saw such a strange thing. At this moment, the 3 barbarian bulls' eyes condensed into black matter, and they suddenly looked up at the ghost spider. The black light suddenly burst out from their eyes. Gwen's eyes widened at this unexpected scene. No, it's too fast, there's no way to dodge it. When she was about to be hit, she could only barely turn sideways to avoid the black material ray. But the spider silk connecting the high-rise building was also directly pierced by the ray at this time. The whole person fell down without restraint. Ah! Gwen couldn't help but let out a scream. The minotaurs below saw Gwen so close and white air came out of their nostrils. They all raised their horns excitedly. If Gwen fell, he would definitely hit the piercing. Oops! Seeing this, Gwen's face changed drastically. She wanted to turn around and shoot the spider silk to the wall. But now the distance is so close, it is difficult to change the situation of falling. What's more, the spider silk has a certain elasticity, so it can't be pulled at such a close distance. Moo. Gwen stared at the blue sky with eyes wide open. Am I going to die? She had never thought that these barbarians would have such an attack method. Otherwise, she would never take it lightly. Huh. However, at this moment, what greeted her was not the pain that pierced through her body. Instead, she was greeted by a warm embrace. She felt the strong chest and looked at it carefully. At this time, the person who hugged her was actually Horde. We meet again. Hodder hugged Gwen, glided in the air for a distance, and landed steadily. Looking at Gwen in his arms, he couldn't help but secretly sigh, it's so good to be young. Even hugging her is soft. Especially when she is wearing a tights, hugging her feels almost zero contact. How did you get here? Gwen was very surprised. She didn't expect that it was Hood who saved her at this critical moment. She felt indescribable joy when she saw Hood, and even her right hand subconsciously rested on Hood's shoulder. Hod was stunned for a moment, and he didn't speak for a long time. Because he hadn't planned to come here in the first place. Thinking that he might get some rewards, he simply followed Wanda here. Who would have thought that he would see Gwen falling when he arrived? Hug her, this trip is worth it. Hod, why are you running so fast? Wanda flew over from a distance and saw Hod holding Gwen from a distance. She raised her eyebrows and said with a strange look, Ghost Spider, why are you here too? Chapter 31. I heard someone calling for help, so I just came over. Gwen said subconsciously. She was originally planning to go back to school through this block. She happened to see this scene, so she took action without hesitation. By the way, Hood, won't you affect the battle like this? Wanda stared at Hood's subconsciously squeezing hand. She felt sour inside, but she still tried hard not to show it. When Gwen heard this, she remembered that she was still being held by Hood. This made her face flush instantly. Fortunately, she had a mask on, otherwise it would be seen. Thank you, Mr. Hood, please let me down. She quickly broke free from Hood's arms, shot out spider silk and lay on the wall of the building beside her. It's okay. Hod shook his head, recalling the feeling just now. After all, he didn't hold her for long, which was a bit regrettable. Be careful, these three bulls don't look like good people. Although Wanda was a little dissatisfied, she still turned her attention to the three bulls below. She also noticed the energy bursting out of the eyes of these three bulls. They are so weird, their eyes emit black gas, and they can also shoot out something like laser eyes. Gwen nodded in agreement. If it weren't for that sudden skill, she wouldn't have been shot down so easily. And the speed of the black gas was so fast that even her spider sense couldn't react. As she said that, she couldn't help but focus her eyes on Horde who was standing beside her. She clearly remembered that Horde's eyes could also shoot out beams of light. Wrong. Hod looked at the bullmen below, frowning slightly. Because to be precise, they are not human beings at all. Generally speaking, most of the monsters were originally humans. But these bullmen below are clearly people transformed from cows. Because from the appearance, body shape, and the horns on their heads, it can be seen that they were originally cows. The standing hooves alone are the most natural appearance of cows, and even the horns look old. If they really mutated later, they would never look like this. They are the product of black magic. Hod had seen similar black magic on the scroll when he was reading it. With the power of the phoenix in his body, he was more sensitive to black magic. Combined with the appearance, he could determine the origin of these barbarians. What? These are not biological mutations, but the product of magic. Wanda widened her eyes and looked at the barbarians below in disbelief. Yes, Hod nodded solemnly. It can be seen that this is definitely a planned event. People who use black magic have a strong purpose. This matter is definitely not as simple as it seems. Moo. The barbarian bull below struggled to grab stones and other things and threw them at the people in the air. The thrown stones and debris even made an explosion sound. Ha! Wanda stretched out her hands and shouted angrily, stopping all the debris from being thrown out. At the same time, Hod had already landed on the ground. The three barbarians were ecstatic when they found Hod falling, and red light flashed in their eyes. As the ground shook, they rushed towards Hod at a high speed. Be careful." Although Gwen knew that Hood was very strong, she couldn't help but warn him. During the fight, she found that the bulls were very strong. The next second, Hood kicked hard with a whip kick, which was so powerful that it even made a sonic boom. With a bang, the three bulls were directly blown away. They hit the ground in the distance and rolled on the ground for many times before they barely stopped. Although they were not dead, they looked miserable. The thick fur was missing a large piece due to the friction of the ground, revealing the bloody muscles. This power is really too terrifying. Seeing this scene, Gwen suddenly remembered that even in terms of strength, Hood was the strongest person she had ever seen. Even until now, she had never seen Hood use his full strength. His strength has always been strong. When Wanda said this, her eyes subconsciously glanced at Hood's waist. She knew this very well. This thing is simply a pile driver that never stops. Moo, boom. The bull man who flew backwards struggled to get up from the ground, looking even crazier. He was obviously seriously injured, but he didn't seem to stop at all. Is this the power of black magic? Gwen murmured as she looked at this horrifying scene. This was completely beyond her cognition, because in this situation, the body of the barbarian bull was not affected at all. At the same time, the barbarian bull roared and began to condense the black rays again. Moo. 3 rays were ejected at the same time, and when they met in the air, they gathered into a thicker black ray. Is this the only trick you can use? Hood impatiently pulled with his right hand, and the small truck next to him blocked his way. When the black ray focused on the truck, it sizzled instantly. The body of the truck was like being splashed with high-concentration sulfuric acid, and it was even corroding continuously, and an irregular black-edged hole appeared. Judging from the continuously dissolving steel, the penetration ability of this ray was not strong. The terrifying thing was that it was corrosive. This actually has a corrosive effect. Quote, Hodder couldn't help but be a little surprised. This was indeed beyond his expectations. Because it takes more than just black magic to change the cow into this appearance. A lot of materials need to be prepared, otherwise there is no way to make the barbarian bull have such a strong power. I thought it was just a small monster used to disrupt New York, but I didn't expect it to have such a strong power. It seems that the black magician in New York is really generous. Hodder raised his lips and murmured in a teasing tone. At the same time, the barbarian who failed to hit did not stop. Instead, he continued to condense those black rays, clearly intending to attack Hodder with long-range means. Oh, they actually have a certain combat awareness. Or are these 3 barbarian bulls being controlled in real time? Looking at the actions of the barbarian bulls, Hood stroked his chin and thought secretly in his heart. Because even though these cows have become barbarian bulls, their IQ should not have improved. Forget it, I don't want to play anymore. Hood shook his head and threw away those messy thoughts. His eyes were full of light, and a bright beam of light blasted out. It blocked the 3 black rays that were shot at it. Boom. At the moment when the 2 energies intertwined, the black rays were instantly melted away. Boom. The golden rays instantly shone on the 3 barbarians, blasting them away. The golden light instantly enveloped the bull man. The moment it hit the bull man, his body was pierced and melted. A large amount of black mist gushed out of the bull man's body. The bull man's remaining body also began to turn into black mist at this time. The black mist continued to tangle and surge in the air, and even emitted a roar and wailing sound like from hell. What's going on? Gwen looked at this extremely strange scene, her eyes filled with fear. She had faced many monsters, but she had never seen such a scene. This was completely beyond her cognition. The black mist seemed to have life. It looked like countless black tentacles entwined in the air. This is the breath of death. Wanda could clearly feel that this large amount of black air exuded a disgusting breath. It looks like something interesting is going to happen. Hodder looked at this scene and did not rush forward to stop it. Instead, he crossed his arms and planned to see what would happen next. This was the first time he faced an enemy who used black magic, although he had studied it. But this was from the Sisson Scroll after all, and the branches of black magic developed later would be different. At this moment, the black fog gathered in the air gradually became solid, and his eyes became deeper. As the black fog dissipated, a huge bull man appeared in the black fog. However, this bull man was very different from the previous bull man. Because its body was covered with all kinds of weird rune marks, and there was some flesh and blood on the pure black skin that was slowly stirring like granulation. Roar! This giant bull man, more than 10 meters tall, roared all day. The surrounding glass was shattered by the huge roar. After all this time, they actually came up with a combined skill. Hod touched his chin and nodded slightly with a smile. It must be said that this does look quite interesting. This is unscientific. How did they do it? This was undoubtedly a huge shock to Gwen. It was incredible that a cow could turn into a humanoid monster, but it could actually turn into this. Moreover, this huge size completely violated her cognition. Such a thing should not appear in this world. And just now she clearly saw that the 3 bulls had been killed by Horde's laser. This was not only resurrected, but also became so big. Is this magic? Wanda's pupils shrank slightly. The giant bull man in front of her contained extremely terrifying power. Whoosh! With a roar, dark flames began to appear on the skin of the giant bull man. The extremely high flames even distorted the surrounding air. The steel next to it also showed signs of melting due to the intense heat. The terrifying heat wave caused the surrounding paper to show signs of spontaneous combustion. My God, what kind of monster is this? The eyes on Gwen's mask suddenly enlarged. This was completely a bug. Even though she was dozens of meters away, she could clearly feel the waves of heat coming towards her. It was as if she was standing directly in a furnace, and even the close-fitting fabric felt sticky to her body. Just as they were hesitating, the giant bull man moved. The giant bull man suddenly opened his mouth and roared, raised his right leg and kicked the ground hard. The asphalt road fell apart in an instant, and the crack spread rapidly towards Hod. What was even more terrifying was that there was a flame bursting out from under the crack. With just one kick, the whole street was suddenly ablaze, and the flames in the cracks burned violently. Be careful! Gwen and Wanda couldn't help but scream when they saw the crack rushing towards Hood. At this moment, Hood looked at this scene motionless, but instead showed a sneer. Facing the oncoming cracks and the bursting fire, he just slowly stretched out his right hand. A red light appeared out of thin air on the entire street. This red light was like a giant barrier, wrapping up the street. With a sudden squeeze, the red light flowed rapidly on the street. The moment the crack wrapped with huge force came into contact with the red light, it was as if it hit an invisible barrier. It stopped instantly, and even the flames that followed were instantly extinguished at this time, and the billowing flames dissipated. In just a blink of an eye, all the flames had disappeared. As a breeze blew, the high temperature just now seemed like a dream. Wow, how did they do that? Gwen looked at the scene on the street in amazement. This is so cool. Hood just gently closed his hands, and the terrifying flames disappeared instantly. It was just like a scene in a science fiction movie. And Hood looked even cooler when he used this trick. Is this the correct way to use magic? Wanda, who possessed chaos magic, was very sensitive to the fluctuations of magic just now. Because at that moment, an extremely terrifying force filled the streets. It was suppressed with an extremely terrifying force, so the flames disappeared instantly. I haven't used the power of the phoenix much, so it's a little rusty. Hodder just used the power of the phoenix to extinguish the fire. The power of the phoenix can turn dust into water, and water into life. It can also turn everything into dust, even into nothingness. Roar! Seeing that the flames were useless, the giant bull took huge steps and ran towards Horde. Every step made the ground crack and shake. The flames burning all over his body burned the building black. Even the footprints left behind were burning with black flames, as if they would never go out. Why are you yelling? It's so annoying. Hod raised his hand and grabbed the air. An unknown force instantly clamped the giant bull's mouth tightly like a giant hand. Although the giant bull closed his mouth, he still ran towards this side with all his strength. I'm tired of playing. I don't want to play anymore. Hod shook his head and pressed his hands down. With just one push, the running giant bull stopped. It was as if it was imprisoned in place by something, and fear flashed in its eyes without intelligence. The flesh and blood on its body turned into mud and scattered, just like quicksand. In just a few seconds, it turned into a pile of dust. Ding! You are about to destroy the bull monster while showing off. Get reward. The power of fire element. Hodder. Wanda was stunned. This move was so cool. She was about to go over to celebrate with Hood. Whoosh! Gwen rushed over with excitement, jumped up and hung on Hood. Mr. Hood, you are so awesome. Wanda narrowed her eyes slightly, as if something was not right. Shouldn't she be holding him? This seemed a little strange. Hood looked at Gwen hanging on him, and raised his head to look at Wanda's covetous expression. No, sister, come down. He felt that Wanda in the air could tear him alive. Especially that look, it was like the wolf saw his meat being taken away. But feeling the ball hitting people, he really didn't want to let go for a while. What's more, it was directly clamped on his body, which made him feel inexplicably refreshed. He finally realized what excitement was. Cough, cough, cough. After a long while, Hood smiled awkwardly and patted Gwen's thigh. Okay, you can let go of Miss Ghost Spider. It must be said that he could even feel the young girl's rebound after these two pats. This feeling made Hood almost want to learn from Wukong and take out his weapon. He really didn't dare to be naughty, because God knew how angry Wanda would be. Oh, sorry, I was too excited just now. Gwen quickly let go of her hand, and was actually touched by Wukong's weapon when she came down. I didn't expect that someone with such great ability would actually carry a gun with him. She couldn't help but think secretly in her heart. After all, a person with such strength would actually be so vigilant. But she was too excited just now, and just remembered that it was Gwen who was familiar with Horde, not Ghost Spider. Okay, Tony will come and deal with the situation later. Wanda suppressed her anger and walked to Hood and said in a muffled voice. Moreover, she could also sensitively perceive that Gwen's mental fluctuations towards Hood were strange. Although Hood did not take the initiative to hug her, he was still full of jealousy. Even in this short sentence, Hood could feel the jealousy contained in it. Which, those media reporters seem to be here to interview you. Hodder suddenly noticed the reporters in the distance and quickly changed the subject. He didn't want Wanda to continue to dwell on this matter. Because he also knew that Wanda could vaguely sense the fluctuations in his heart. But not this time. Wanda was stunned, because this time she was just watching the show. If she accepted the interview like this, it would be inappropriate no matter how you look at it. I don't like to be in the spotlight, and now the Avengers need to change their reputation. Hood shook his head, although the last incident made the public opinion outside a certain improvement. But it is still limited after all. If he gives up the credit this time, it will be a good thing for Wanda. What's more, he has already received the system's reward. Facing such troublesome reporters, it is better to leave it to Wanda to deal with. Wanda looked at the sincere look on Hood's face and finally nodded. Hood was right, because the Avengers really needed these positive things to keep their attention. Then Ghost Spider and I will go first. Hodder turned his eyes to Gwen, and a barely perceptible smile flashed across his lips. Wanda could only nod helplessly and stay to deal with these reporters. As soon as the two left, a large number of reporters immediately surrounded them. Scarlet Witch, did you deal with the monster yourself this time? You are simply our New York hero. It is said that the monster is more than 10 meters tall. Is it true? You didn't retreat when facing such a terrifying monster. Was it because of the people? Did you suffer any serious injuries in this incident? Quote. Because the reporters didn't dare to approach until they saw the monster in the distance disappear. So they didn't know what happened at the scene. Seeing that only Wanda was there, they naturally thought that all of this was done by Wanda. Wanda is really not good at lying. She has a look of wanting to say something but not being able to. But she remembered what Hood said, and finally she could only smile stiffly and nod. Looking at the reporters' questions, she was really overwhelmed. Fortunately, Tony and Steve arrived at the critical moment and drove all the reporters away. They also set up a cordon at the scene. Wanda, are you okay? Steve came to Wanda with a shield in his hand and asked solemnly. From the situation at the scene, it can be seen that this must be a very difficult battle. Even the ground and everything around were affected. It can even be said that even the entire street was almost destroyed. I'm fine, I'm not hurt. Wanda pursed her lips and shook her head. She was watching the whole fight, and Hood alone was able to handle it all. You are really getting stronger and stronger. Steve looked around and couldn't help but sigh. Even Banner in anger was probably no better than this. Everywhere he looked, everything was destroyed beyond recognition. I didn't kill that monster. Wanda took a deep breath and shook her head to deny it. Although Horde asked her to admit it, she didn't want to lie to her friend. And if it was her, it would be very difficult to deal with this monster. The fire alone would make her helpless. Who is that? Steve asked with a puzzled look on his face. He didn't expect that there was someone so powerful. A mysterious person. Wanda shook her head awkwardly. She didn't know how to explain the existence of Hood. That's enough. Tony, who had just dealt with the media, came here and looked at Wanda deeply, his mouth slightly opened, wanting to say something but stopping. But in the end, he turned his head away and forced himself to hold it back. He knew very well that Wanda was definitely not lying. This mysterious person has always been the one he wanted to know the most. He helped Wanda learn to control magic, and stood up to save the people at this time. The more this happened, the more confusing this person's identity became. He wanted to ask, but what Wanda said came to his mind again. It would be better to wait for her to speak. Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch. Quote, quote. Wanda looked back in confusion, and saw a large group of people holding banners and shouting, Scarlet Witch. Outside the cordon. Those outside are all your fans. Steve looked at Wanda's puzzled expression and said with a smile, go and leave them an autograph and take a photo. Yeah, Wanda nodded and smiled as she walked over to take a photo. However, she didn't notice at all. At the back of the crowd, there was a pair of strange blue eyes staring at her. Those eyes were full of greedy desire. Chaos magic is really on her. The figure in the crowd was Agatha. The woman's eyes fell on the dust that the barbarians turned into within the cordon. She couldn't stop smiling, and her whole body was shaking with excitement. There is actually the power of the Phoenix. What kind of opportunity did God give me? Chaos magic and the power of the Phoenix appeared at the same time. Agatha's eyes were cold. She wanted both of them. New York, Queens. On the towering clock tower, the huge clock is ticking. From the top floor, you can see the scenery of New York at a glance. Pedestrians are walking on the street, and as the sun sets, more and more car lights are turned on. From above, it looks like light strips. The orange light shines on the earth, just like a beautiful oil painting. At the top of the clock tower, the two sat on the edge of the top floor of the clock tower, looking at the scenery in the distance with a comfortable look. Since Hood left Manhattan, he was brought here by Gwen. You really like to enjoy the scenery. Hood supported himself with both hands and tilted his head to look at the ghost spider beside him. He found that Gwen liked this kind of place where she could enjoy the scenery. Yeah, Gwen nodded slightly, her lips slightly raised, and her voice was a little more lazy. In the past, she had always enjoyed the scenery alone, but now there was someone she could trust. She felt a little more excited, which was very satisfying to her. It seems that you never get tired of seeing the scenery of Queens. Hodder smiled and turned his head to look into the distance again. It's not that I can't bear to see you, but because you are here. Gwen said, taking off her mask, revealing her slightly red cheeks. When she said this, her heartbeat accelerated. For her, this was equivalent to a confession. However, this was also the most real thought in her heart. You've learned to flirt, little Gwen. Hodder put his right hand on Gwen's face and pinched it, feeling the soft touch. Facing Hood's actions, Gwen not only did not resist, but even moved closer. Smelling the sandalwood scent of the cologne next to her, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Although she didn't know how Hood felt about her, she knew very well that she had fallen. By the way, have you ever seen New York in reverse? Gwen suddenly stood up and stretched her graceful curves, and turned her head to look at Hood beside her with joy. The reversed New York. Hodder looked at Gwen with a puzzled look on his face. He really didn't know what the reversed New York would look like. Just look at it upside down. Idiot. Gwen shot out spider silk from her wrist, and she hung upside down on the roof. Her short golden hair fell down, shining brightly under the setting sun. She smiled and looked at Hood with anticipation. Do you want to try it with me? Sure. Hodder did not hang upside down, but opened his hands and clasped them together. The scenery of New York was instantly reversed upside down. When Gwen saw this scene, she was stunned. This is... Gwen returned to Hood's side and looked at him with incredible eyes. It was the first time she saw such a strange scene. It was an extremely strange feeling. The world seemed to be upside down at this moment. But she could clearly feel that this should only affect her senses. This is just a little magic trick. Hodder smiled and shook his head, holding Gwen's hand and sitting on the edge. In fact, the whole world has not changed, he just used magic to change the world they were watching. It was not the mirror space of Master Ancient One. It must be said that this was the first time that Hodder saw New York upside down. It was as if the sky and the earth were exchanged at this time. This was a completely different experience, as if the whole world was hanging upside down in the sky. He couldn't help but shift his gaze to Gwen, who was standing next to him. Although the scenery was good, no matter how good the scenery was, it was not as good as the beauty next to him. The afterglow set off Gwen's petite figure, her face as white as snow, her eyebrows as stars, and her golden hair fluttering in the autumn wind, just like a dynamic wallpaper. Gwen noticed the hot gaze, looked over, and their eyes met, and her face suddenly blushed. "Don't keep staring at me, look at the scenery." She couldn't help but shift her gaze, but despite this, her keen spider sense could still detect this heat. Her heart couldn't help but be very excited at this moment. Beautiful scenery should be matched with beautiful women. When Huoda said this, his voice was calm. But the more so, the more it can move people's hearts. Isn't the upside-down world very strange? Gwen's blushing face was hot, and she quickly changed the subject. However, the reversed scene gave her a new experience. Especially with a man sitting next to her, Gwen's heartbeat accelerated. A little bit, it's like seeing a whole new world. Hodder nodded in agreement. He had never thought of looking at the world from this different angle before. The pair of eyes as deep as black gemstones turned to the horizon again. After sensing that Hodder had shifted his gaze, Gwen looked at Hodder cautiously. It was dark, and the neon lights of the city reflected on his face, which was more angular and attractive. Is this the person I love? The more Gwen looked at him, the more she felt that Hodder was like a black hole. The black hole attracted her attention, and she couldn't even divert her gaze. "Hodder," Gwen suddenly said, "I feel dizzy, I think I have a fever." "How come?" Hodder was shocked. How could Gwen suddenly have a fever? You know, Gwen is a ghost spider, and her physique is much better than that of ordinary people. He didn't care about anything else and quickly put his left hand on Gwen's forehead. The next moment, as his warm hand touched Gwen's forehead, Gwen's face also became slightly hot, and even goosebumps stood up at this time. "It's a bit hot indeed." Hodder did feel his cheeks burning. "You are really a fool." Gwen pouted and couldn't help but muttered softly. "But, your forehead is indeed a little." At this moment, when Hod was about to say something, Gwen's voice came again. "Change the way," Gwen whispered, her earlobes also slightly red. "What did you say?" Hodder didn't understand Gwen's thoughts for a moment. But he also felt that something was wrong with Gwen's current situation. The next second, accompanied by a gust of fragrant wind, the girl suddenly approached him. Hodder couldn't help but hug the warm and soft jade in his arms. At the same time, he was a little bit unbelievable. Was he kissed by force? The object turned out to be the innocent Gwen. When Hood turned his head to look at Wanda, he was shocked to find that the smile on Wanda's face had frozen. Although he hadn't started yet, he had already been caught. Wanda's expression now clearly showed that she already knew there was someone upstairs, and it was a girl's voice. He really didn't expect that Gwen would call him at this most critical moment. He originally wanted to find a reason to trick Wanda away, but now it is obvious that there is no way to trick her. Crunch. Anger has emerged in Wanda's smile, and she can even hear the sound of teeth clenching. She also noticed that Hood's clothes were completely wet, and that sentence clearly meant that he was taking a shower. Hood's preference for being in the bathroom also came to mind. Could this be? "My dear Hood, there seems to be a girl calling you upstairs." Wanda took a deep breath and looked into Hood's eyes with forced calmness. However, from the bag in her hand, it can be seen that this dress is probably not for her. Because Hood didn't know when she would come over, and she came over tonight because she missed Hood. But she didn't expect to encounter this incident. Emotions such as grievance, anger, and unwillingness surged in her heart. She didn't even know what to do in her confused heart, and even wondered if she had heard it wrong. "Really," Hodder said with a stiff expression, "it should be the maid." At this moment, he felt that his head was like a paste and couldn't turn around. It's not that he didn't react fast enough, but the feeling brought by these two people was completely different from the previous girls. Before meeting Wanda, he had encountered such things more than once, but his heart was not moved. But what he didn't expect was that he was actually panicked at this time. Hodder, you give the servants a day off today, and there won't be any servants at night. Wanda's body was trembling slightly, her eyes were filled with pain, and her eyes were slightly red at this moment. She had guessed it, but she just didn't want to admit it. She hoped that Hodder could use a reason to deceive herself. But this reason was so poor that she couldn't deceive herself even if she wanted to. She only felt a pain in her heart. She had obviously fallen in love with him, but this happened. Wanda. Hodder held her hand and wanted to say something. But Wanda pushed Hodder away. She walked upstairs quickly with the bag of clothes in her hand. Since there was no way to deceive herself, she had to see it with her own eyes. Because even she herself didn't know what she should do now. There was only one thought left in her mind: who was it? Who was better than herself? Little witch, even if you are anxious, there is no need to be so anxious. Hodder gritted his teeth, forced a smile, and quickly caught up. He could feel Wanda's current emotions, like a powder keg. He was not even sure whether Wanda would tear Gwen alive the moment she saw her. Because he knew very well what kind of power Wanda would burst out when she was angry. Although nothing really happened, Gwen was indeed taking a shower in the room upstairs. Although he said that he did not start, once the two of them bumped into each other, nothing could be explained. Don't stop me, I want to go up. The faster Wanda walked, the more pain she felt in her heart, and her voice became hoarse and choked. She was afraid that she would not be able to hold back and would burst into tears. This was her first time, the first time she liked someone so much. It had not been long, but it was her true feelings. Soon, she came to the door. A familiar smell drifted across her nose. It was the smell of perfume that appeared when she and Hood had dinner together. She stopped and paused outside the door, as if there was another world outside the door, and once it was opened, the whole world would be overturned. Wanda, listen to me. Hodder came behind Wanda, his eyes full of complexity. He didn't want to, but he was very big, and one or two people couldn't hold it. He originally wanted to let Wanda accept it slowly, but he didn't expect that this day would come so soon. He was usually smart, but he didn't have any way. But despite this, he didn't stop Wanda from opening the door. He just let out a sigh of helplessness. After a moment, Wanda seemed to have made enough mental preparations. She stretched out her white hand and grasped the door handle made of oak. Twisted it suddenly, gritted her teeth and pulled. As the door opened, everything in the room came into view. In that classical room, everything was neat and tidy, and the room was full of life. The room was empty. The quilt was neatly placed on the bed. Everything inside was so familiar and normal. Looking at the tidy room, Hood finally felt relieved. Fortunately, Gwen's clothes were not thrown around, otherwise the consequences would be even more serious. However, the light in the bathroom was on at this time. Wanda's eyelids drooped, and even her eyes became dim at this time. She felt as if she had been hit hard in the heart, and she just dully shifted her gaze to the slightly transparent frosted bathroom door. The other side of the bathroom door was covered with water mist, and it was obvious that someone was taking a shower inside. The lips that were specially painted with lipstick turned extremely pale at this time. Bathroom mist. After a long time, Wanda squeezed out these words with a weak voice. It seemed that she had used up all her strength at the moment she said these words. This feeling made her not know where to go. Even breathing became difficult at this moment. The feeling of chest tightness made Wanda subconsciously breathe deeply. From her eyes that were gradually filled with bloodshot, it could be seen that her heart was far from being as calm as she imagined. Hood held the cold hand and looked straight at Wanda. But Wanda did not meet his eyes. She slowly put the bag in her hand outside the door. She turned around and walked outside, her steps becoming more and more hurried. Yes, who was she? Just spending a good night together meant they were together. She and Hood had not even confirmed their relationship. Girlfriend, she had never said that. The relationship they had was probably the most unsightly one. Although she was unwilling, what could she do? It was obviously she who took the initiative first. Maybe Hood already had a girlfriend, and she was the one who interfered. It was just that she was too self-righteous. What could she count as? Although their hearts were intertwined, she still couldn't accept it. Who Hood was with had nothing to do with her. It was his freedom. Wanda. At this moment, a warm hug directly embraced Wanda. The warmth and fragrance coming from behind made Wanda so attached. But she was still in pain, and this could not be solved by just a hug. I know. Wanda shook her head and spoke in a hoarse voice. She really didn't want to cry, nor did she want to show her most vulnerable side. But she had to say that when Hood hugged her, she hesitated. Because if he really left, it would really be over. But could she really accept it? What are you doing? Just when Wanda was thinking about it, she suddenly felt that she was picked up by Horde. Since the little witch can't wait, come on. Princess Hood held Wanda and turned to walk towards the bathroom. You don't want to. Wanda's brain crashed instantly, and there was only one thought left in her mind. Hood was planning to come directly together. But if so, it would simply be. Just as she was thinking about it, Hood opened the bathroom door. The mist immediately hit her face, which made Wanda close her eyes nervously. Hood was really too bold, he actually carried her indirectly. But maybe this is a good thing. If there are 3 people, one more person might reduce the workload. My little witch, don't you want to join us? Why don't you open your eyes? Hodder leaned close to Wanda's ear, buried his head in her hair and spoke while breathing out hot air. The itchy feeling blew on her ears, causing Wanda to shrink her neck slightly. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes with trembling eyelashes. Since she had already made sufficient mental preparations, she might see an extremely unbearable scene. But when she opened her eyes, she was stunned. Because there was no one in the bathroom except for the hazy water mist. No one. She was completely stunned. How could there be no one? This was completely different from what she imagined. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be another sister in there, right? My lovely little witch, why are you so nervous? Hodder approached Wanda and whispered, I came back from the rain and was about to take a shower, and you came. I had to open the door for you in a hurry. When Wanda heard this, her heart was at ease. There was a little more distress in her eyes. Obviously, the other party cared about her so much. Obviously, there was no relationship between them, but Hood still hurriedly opened the door for her at this time. But because of this incident, she would want to turn around and leave. Since you want to be together so much, let's be together. I know that all the readers here are decent people and don't like to read it. In order to save you money, I will skip it, for a long time. Afterwards, Hod carried the limp Wanda out and gently put her down. Little witch, you still need to exercise more, you are still too weak. Hodder kissed Wanda's forehead gently, looking at her with a smile. Facing Hodder's aggressive eyes, Wanda quickly curled up to cover them. Although her hands were already in the right place. The more she looked like a charming girl, making Hodder's eyes even hotter. Who said I was weak? I exercise regularly, Wanda said dissatisfiedly, and then said, it's obviously your problem. Every time she felt that her body did not belong to her, and even her head was like a paste. It was like being in the sea, and she could only follow the tides, and there was no way to resist at all. But you said you wanted to make the sea surge, and even wanted to use magic. Hodder moved closer to Wanda, staring at her. At this moment, the emotion expressed in his eyes reached Wanda's eyes. She felt this emotion very clearly, and her body trembled with fear. Because this feeling was so terrifying that she even felt that she was no longer herself. Shut up, stop talking. Although the air conditioner was on in the room, this conversation made Wanda feel hot. It was like she had a 40-degree fever, which made her mind a little dazed. And she had just said, don't go on, stop. How did she punctuate it? This is simply nonsense. Have a good rest here. I'll get you some soup to nourish your body. After Hodder straightened Wanda, he did not forget to cover her with a blanket. Yeah, Wanda also felt a little tired, leaning on the pillow and closing her eyes. Hodder walked out of the room carefully. His heart was finally at ease at this time. In order to cover up this matter, even the bull spell was used. Only when one is tired enough, one will not have the energy to think about other things. And judging from the current situation, it won't be long before Wanda falls into a deep sleep. How did he know this? This is common sense. It's time to go to the other side. Hodder sighed and drew a circle in the air. The dimensional gate with flowing light appeared in front of him instantly. Inside was another room. Judging from the decorations inside, it was about the same size as the previous room. However, there were no personal items inside. When Hodder crossed the dimensional gate, he saw Gwen lying on the bed, wrapped tightly in a quilt. The little head was looking at the 85-inch TV screen not far away. How did I get here just now? Gwen had just finished taking a shower and hadn't waited for her clothes to be put on when a strange light door appeared. Just as she was wearing the battle suit to see what was going on, the door closed. However, she saw the surrounding scenery and realized that she was still in Horde's house. Ah, we had guests at home just now, so I changed to a better environment for you. Hodder explained without blushing. How could a seasoned lover be stumped by such a thing? Just now, he suddenly thought of what to do, and simply teleported Gwen to the guest room downstairs. Oh, I was wondering why there were always banging noises coming from upstairs. Gwen didn't think much about it. After all, it was normal for someone like Hood to be busy with work at night. Cough cough. Huoda coughed twice, and his expression became a little strange. Dot, are there any clothes? Gwen lifted the quilt covering her head, revealing her milky white shoulders. She had been waiting for clothes, so she just took an extra bath and hid in bed. I'll give it to you. Hod opened the dimension door directly and took the clothes from a clothing store. After all, there was no time to buy clothes now. Thank you. Gwen looked at the clothes and was a little surprised, because they were all her size. But seeing Hood still standing there, she shyly said, "Why don't you turn around?" Yeah, Hod turned around obediently, but at this moment, his eyes were attracted by a stainless steel decoration on the wall not far away. It could clearly see the movements behind him. He could even see clearly. Imelda needs a raise. Hodder thought to himself, this is really polished. Gwen didn't notice these small details. Thank you, this dress fits me well. Gwen was pleasantly surprised. This dress suited her style very well. Plus the size was right. She knew that Hood had put in a lot of effort. Meanwhile, upstairs, Wanda was a little sleepy waiting. Horde, she called out, but still got no response. After hesitating for a moment, she wrapped herself in a bath towel and walked out. But as soon as she opened the door, she felt the magical fluctuations in the air. The chaos magic in her body responded. Is there a magical fluctuation? She was surprised and reached out to touch the air. Buzz. The air vibrated. Someone was casting some magic here. Could someone be invading? Hod, where are you? Wanda's face suddenly became extremely solemn. The remnant in the magic fluctuations was too obvious. Could it be a black magician? This possibility suddenly emerged in Wanda's mind. She didn't forget the 3 bulls that appeared in Manhattan. She opened her hands, and the crimson light instantly flowed out from her hands. She planned to locate her current approximate position through the magic fluctuations left in the air. Although she didn't know what was going on. If it was a battle, then she might be able to help Horde. The crimson light continued to flow in the air, and from the fluctuations, she felt the connection position on the other side. Wanda, why did you come out? At the corner of the stairs, Hood came up with a silver plate in his hands. When he saw Wanda's actions, he instantly understood Wanda's idea. The witch was preparing to find the second teleportation point of the dimensional portal. Where did you go just now? I felt traces of magic and thought there was some danger. Wanda looked at Hood coming over and couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. For her, Hood has occupied a very important place in her heart. Hod remained calm and said with a calm smile, I was in a hurry to come back to accompany you, so I just used magic. Lying. It was just a matter of holding his hand. He could lie without any fluctuations. So that's how it is. Wanda blinked her eyes, which were as big as the stars, and a warm current surged in her heart. She didn't expect that Hood would even consider this in order to spend more time with her. It was impossible not to be moved. Girls are always most easily moved by details. Let's go back while the soup is still warm. Hodder held the soup in his right hand and walked towards the room with Wanda in his left hand. He couldn't help but secretly feel lucky that he was faster, otherwise he would have no way to explain. Back in the room, Hodder placed the soup in front of Wanda. I was wondering why you were teleported downstairs just now. Wanda picked up the spoon and said casually. Because she had just located the other end. It should be on the first floor of the villa. As soon as he said this, the expression on Hood's face froze. I teleported to the first floor and then I remembered that the maid was not at home, so I just went out to buy it. When he said this, his heart accelerated slightly. After all, Wanda's speed was too fast. And he himself couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It seems that the power of the shield machine still needs to be further improved. He himself didn't expect Wanda to still have the strength to walk to the door. No wonder, that's why I detected another magical aura. Wanda looked at the heavy rain outside, and her heart was filled with love. She bought this in the heavy rain. It's raining outside, don't be too troublesome in the future. It's okay, I know magic. Hodder smiled and held Wanda's soft little hand. This is a series that can play anything. Then, shall we drink together? Wanda carefully scooped up a spoonful of the fragrant chicken soup with a spoon, and blew it to cool it down before putting it to Hord's mouth. Because their relationship had become closer, she was no longer as shy as before. Okay, Hod leaned close to his mouth and took a sip. Looking at Hod's gentle expression, Wanda felt a warm feeling in her heart. Because this is the life she wants to experience the most. As long as they are together, they can feel comfortable and loved. It's just a little bit bad. Her legs can't stop shaking until now. But in her opinion, this is love. Wanda. Hodder dragged the chair closer to Wanda, and his left hand suddenly hugged her slender waist. Can't you take a break? And I haven't even finished the soup yet. Da's eyes widened instantly, and even the hand holding the spoon trembled slightly. This was simply too scary. But for some reason, she felt a little bit addicted to it, and it was endless aftertaste. Okay, then you drink first. I'll go downstairs and make some preparations. The last punishment is not over yet. Hood patted his head with a wicked smile. Then he slowly stood up and walked outside. Wanda looked at Hood's wicked smile before he left. In an instant, she seemed to remember something. If she remembered correctly, she seemed to have agreed to some strange game with Hood while talking nonsense. Thinking of this, her cheeks flushed and she quickly lowered her head. Since he wanted to, she had no choice but to continue to move the soup spoon. After Hood closed the door, he did not use the latitude door again. Instead, he walked quickly towards the kitchen on the first floor. In the insulation area of the kitchen on the first floor, there were 7 or 8 bowls of warm chicken soup. And each serving was extremely nourishing chicken soup. I am smart and brave. Hod couldn't help but praise himself. Because he had been in a lot of business before, his business was sometimes very busy. So he asked Imelda to prepare more than a dozen servings of chicken soup every day and keep them here to keep warm. Go out to buy it. How is that possible? There is not enough time. He picked up one of the bowls of chicken soup and put it on the tray, then opened the latitude door and entered the guest room. At this time, Gwen sat obediently by the bed. When she saw the familiar golden light appear, she smiled brightly. You're back. Gwen looked at the chicken soup in Hood's hand, and her eyes instantly turned red. You really went to buy chicken soup. Although she had just declined, Hood still went to buy a bowl of chicken soup. It was impossible not to be touched. She hadn't felt such caring warmth for a long time. Look at you, it's just a small matter. Hood smiled and took out his hand to pinch Gwen's little face. Drinking some chicken soup after getting wet in the rain is good for your body. Facing Hood's outstretched hand, Gwen moved closer and let Hood knead it as much as he wanted. But for me, this is not a small matter, you are very good. Gwen looked at Hord seriously. She didn't know what other people's love was like, but she felt the love very clearly at this time. Come on, drink the chicken soup first. Hord let go of his hand and put the chicken soup on the table. You should have some too. At the moment when Hood put down the chicken soup, Gwen held Hood's hand. There was an indescribable feeling in her eyes. This was clearly the girl's most sincere love. Okay, Hord sat on the chair and nodded with a smile. The next second, Ruan Yu sat directly on him, like a cute kitten. I'll feed you. Although Gwen's face was already red, she still held back. In fact, she had just checked why men carry guns with them. It was not until now that she knew what it was, but although it was uncomfortable, she still shook it. This little girl, Hodder thought to himself, this is simply a crime for him. After drinking the chicken soup, Hodder picked up Gwen and put her on the bed and said, "It's getting late, you should go to bed early." He had thought about whether to send Gwen back first, but it was not appropriate to chase Gwen away so late at night. And he actually had an indescribable excitement in his heart. For some reason, he planned to let Gwen stay in the guest room. Gwen was stunned. Then you. The reason why she took the initiative today was because her parents were not at home. So, she was actually prepared for something to happen tonight, but she didn't expect that Wanda was actually going to leave. This made her feel a little disappointed. After all, this was already a done deal. Be good, I have a big business worth hundreds of millions to discuss tonight, so there is no other way. After saying that, Hood rubbed Gwen's fluffy hair, and then said, "But I will make you a hearty breakfast tomorrow." He did think about whether something should happen tonight, but it was really inconvenient for Wanda to be here. So this matter can only be postponed for a while. After all, opening the channel is not something that can be solved in 20 or 30 minutes. This is the same as the physique of the reader, it will take at least 2 or 3 hours. Although he can summon a clone, he will not do such a stupid thing. To read the exciting novel, just go to Philu Novel Network. Put a hat on yourself. That's simply a fool's wits. All right, business is indeed important. Gwen nodded simply. After all, this project worth hundreds of millions of dollars is indeed something that needs to be taken seriously. It is estimated that Hood disappeared for so long just now because of this reason. He could only nod in disappointment. When Hood opened the door to the master bedroom, what came into his sight was Wanda stretching her curvy body and yawning. "Why did you come back just now?" Wanda couldn't help but complain in a spoiled tone when she saw Hood coming back. She had been waiting for more than 20 minutes and she was a little sleepy. But she wanted to wait for Hood to come back, so she could only keep resisting the sleepiness. Because these things are too hard to choose. After all, games are like this, the more props the more fun it is. Hodder said, with a sly smile. He took out one thing after another from the belt beside him. These are clearly various cuz uniforms, and they also come with balls connected to the belts, soft braids and so on. As for the socks, the choices are even more diverse, and just looking at them is enough to make you dizzy. What are you going to do? Wanda's eyes widened. She knew she had to prepare. But she didn't expect that there would be so many. There were so many that she was dazzled. It even shocked her worldview. She didn't even know what some things were used for. Although she knew that Hood's hobby was incredible, this was a bit too much. This was not a game that normal people should play. No, Wanda shook her head repeatedly with a fearful voice. This made her feel an inexplicable fear. Facing these complicated things, she didn't know whether Hood wanted to pass the level with one life. "Since you don't know, I don't mind helping you." Hodder took out a half-length cotton backless dress with a wicked smile. When she saw the dress, Wanda's eyes widened. "I don't want it, the color of this prop is not good looking." She racked her brains to find a reason for herself. This thing is too embarrassing. Just imagining it, she felt that she couldn't accept it at all. She decisively refused. "Are you kidding? She doesn't want this. I choose it myself." Without giving Hood any chance to react, Wanda quickly searched through a large pile of cuz clothes. After a while, Wanda was stunned and pulled out a white ghost spider suit from a pile of clothes. And this suit was actually a little wet. She looked at the suit with a shocked face. What's going on? Wanda picked up the white ghost spider suit and looked at Hood with a puzzled look. She never thought that the ghost spider suit would be in here. Hood was also stunned when he saw the clothes taken out. Because when he took the clothes just now, he didn't notice that Gwen's suit that needed to be washed was also mixed in. "I bought it at a store outside. I think it is used for cuz. After all, it is a hero. As for why it's wet, it's probably because of the rain." Hodder said as he picked up the ghost spider suit and prepared to put it away. "If you don't like it, forget it." He was now worried. He was really busy and mixed it up. "Wait, I want to wear this one." But what Hood didn't expect was that Wanda actually took it back directly. After all, among so many clothes, this one has the most fabric. Question mark question mark question mark. Hood was stunned when he heard this. Oh my god, she wants to wear Pinru's clothes. Oh my god, this is really exciting. Besides, didn't you say that Ghost Spider has a great figure? Wanda pouted her lips and spoke with an unconvinced look. She still remembered that when she was sitting in the passenger seat, Hood was fascinated by the poster. Since there happened to be clothes here, they could also compare who has a better figure between the two of them. That's fine too. Wanda was a little excited. He didn't expect that he would wear Pinru's clothes. Wait, Wanda leaned on the bed and planned to go to the bathroom with the spider suit. Little witch, shouldn't we be honest with each other a long time ago? Hodder looked at Wanda's fair legs, supported himself on the bed with both hands and started to tease. Get out of the way. Wanda hurried into the bathroom, fearing that Hood would do something weird again. After a while, Wanda came out of the bathroom. She saw that the zipper of the Ghost Spider's battlesuit was about to burst. Even the Somali trench could not stop it. Is this too small? You bought the wrong size. Wanda came out of the bathroom, feeling a little awkward. No. This is just too suitable, just too great. Hodder quickly stepped forward and hugged Wanda, his eyes shining. This must be normal, after all, this is Gwen's combat uniform. And he also intuitively realized the difference between the two. This feeling is so big that the clothes can explode. The tight clothes show Wanda to the fullest. What's more terrible is that this is a kind of spiritual stimulation, which is difficult to describe in words. Even Hodder saw that the southern hemisphere seemed to explode. This feeling makes people's blood expand, it's just too exciting. Are you sure? Looking at Hood's excitement, Wanda was actually a little happy. Does this mean that she has already won the game against the Ghost Spider? Swish. But at this moment, Wanda seemed to feel something was pushed open. It was clearly the zipper that slid down a little due to the pressure. It seems that my little witch is much more powerful than I thought. Hodder was burning with desire and he couldn't stand it anymore. Don't come over here. Wanda suddenly felt something was wrong. Hood's eyes were like a hungry wolf seeing a piece of meat. The next second, she was thrown onto the soft bed. The headboard shook violently, creaking. The two of them instantly became bed-quality inspectors. At the same time, downstairs. What on earth is Mr. Hodder doing? Gwen was lying on the bed watching TV, bored. Crunch. What's that sound? She looked up in confusion. It's so noisy. What big deal is Mr. Hodder talking about? There's such a big noise. Quote. Gwen was a little curious for a moment. After all, this is a big project worth hundreds of millions. Her curiosity surged, and she suddenly wanted to go up and take a look. Forget it, if I go up, it will probably affect them. After hesitating for a long time, Gwen still suppressed her curiosity. If her interruption caused problems in the business, she didn't even know how to apologize. After all, this was not a small amount of money, and it could even be said that even if she offered her body to them, it would be useless. So in the end, she didn't go upstairs to disturb the two people. This must be a very loud noise, otherwise there wouldn't be such a big commotion. Listening to the creaking sound upstairs, Gwen suddenly felt that doing business was really difficult. It seems that even an all-round person like Hood has put in a lot of effort. After all, just having to work late at night is already beyond many people. Even if the noise is shaking the table, it must be because of the excitement. She can even hear the direction of the sound upstairs. It seems that this should be a furniture business. Gwen imagined in her mind that Hood and his partners were testing the durability of the furniture. After all, this was the only explanation for why they tested the table and the bed at one time. Even after a while, they tested the chair again. The only possibility was that it was a furniture business. And from this situation, it must have taken a lot of thought, and even panting could be heard. It was unknown how long it took before Gwen, who was lying on the bed, fell asleep in a daze. The next morning, Gwen was sleeping soundly on the bed with her head tilted. She hadn't slept so comfortably for a long time, even though Hood was not there. But she knew very well that Hood was upstairs, and as long as Hood was there, she would have endless sense of security. She even drooled from the corners of her mouth while sleeping, with a happy smile on her face. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door. Gwen got up in a daze, dragged her feet and opened the door. It was Hood standing outside the 867 door. Mr. Hodder, why did you get up so early? Gwen looked so cute with her messy hair and rubbing her eyes. Morning. Hodder saw the dark circles under Gwen's eyes and asked in confusion, did you stay up late last night? Why do you have dark circles? Yes, I have insomnia. You were a little loud when you were discussing the project with the furniture company last night. Gwen said what she was thinking in a sleepy state, and then she quickly said, but it's okay. I know you want to discuss business with Mr. Hodder. Furniture dealer. Hodder was stunned and almost didn't react. After all, he didn't sleep all night, and basically he got what he worked for. Aren't you a furniture dealer? I heard you guys testing furniture upstairs. Gwen nodded seriously. After all, she had thought about it carefully for a long time before confirming the other party's identity. If he wasn't a furniture dealer, there would be no need to test the durability of the furniture. Right. Hood realized instantly that the sound insulation of this house was much worse than he thought. I'll arrange a better room for you next time. He could only nod and make the best of it. He couldn't just tell Gwen honestly what happened upstairs. Your room looks good, Gwen murmured in a discontented tone. If she could cuddle with her stuffed bear like she did with her own, she would definitely sleep peacefully. What did you say? Although he was indestructible, Wanda was still a little confused that night and didn't hear clearly. It's okay. Gwen blushed and shook her head. She wanted to pinch herself. She was always distracted and said everything she thought. I'll go wash up first, and then we can have breakfast together. Gwen moved closer to Hood and gently pulled the corner of Hood's clothes. Although it was only one night, she really wanted to stick with him all the time. And she was worried that Hood would be busy with business again today. If he really had to go out to do business, she would have no way to stop him. I've done it. Hood smiled and rubbed Gwen's little head. After all, he had already burst out all his strength last night. With his powerful strength, Wanda fainted and would not wake up in a short time. So he took this opportunity to quickly make breakfast. Really? Gwen's eyes widened. She originally thought that Hood was too busy to make breakfast. After all, he was talking business with others until so late yesterday. How could he spare the time? Well, go wash up. Hodder's mouth curled up. Yeah. Gwen jumped up excitedly. She didn't expect that Hood would care about her so much. She knew that for a successful person like Hood, time is money. In the restaurant, there were more than a dozen dishes on the marble table. And these dishes were fragrant, and the whole hall was filled with various aromas. Wow, is this the breakfast you prepared? Gwen looked at the dazzling array of breakfasts and couldn't help but hugged and kissed Hood beside her. She really didn't expect that Hood could really cook so many kinds of dishes. This looks much better than the restaurant last time. Come. Hodder pulled out a chair and invited Gwen to sit down. It contains different breakfasts from different countries. For him, cooking a table of dishes is not a problem at all. Especially when he has magic, he can even control several pots at the same time. At the same time, he can cut vegetables and knead dough at the same time, which is simply omnipotent. Gwen looked at Hodder's gentlemanly appearance and was even more moved. For a little girl, details can touch people's hearts. Even if it is just a subconscious behavior, it can reflect the gentleman's demeanor. This simply made her give Hodder crazy points. I already thought Hodder was very good, but now it has far exceeded her expectations. This little bun is so delicious. The golden sticks are also very good. Is this milky white soy milk? Gwen looked at the dishes on the table and tasted each one. Every bite made her taste buds dance. If a woman is with you in the future, her stomach will never leave you. Gwen rubbed her bloated belly and said with envy. After all, there are too few boys who can take the initiative to make breakfast here. Not to mention making breakfast, they basically use cereal and sandwiches instead. This is the first time she has eaten such a rich breakfast. When you are with me, it's not just your stomach that will be taken care of. Hodder said this with a smile, and then he muttered in his heart, after all, breakfast and other things that warm the stomach are not good enough. The two spent a wonderful morning together. Gwen ate all the breakfast on the table. Although she was full, she still smiled and said, I will come here every day from now on. As long as you like, I can cook for you every day. After saying that, Wanda looked at his watch and then said, do you still have to go to school today? Yes, I'm going to be late. Gwen glanced at the clock on the wall and almost jumped up. It's almost 8 o'clock. Although she was a freshman and didn't have to report to school, she was a well-known good girl and a good student. She would only skip classes if she encountered some big trouble that the police couldn't solve. No hurry, I'll take you there soon, Hod said with a smile. After all, since he had the dimension gate, everything he did was much more convenient. By the way, where is my uniform? Just as Gwen was about to leave, she suddenly remembered this. After all, after she changed it yesterday, she asked Hod to help her wash it. Oh, your combat uniform, wait a minute. Hod twitched his mouth, and his expression became a little awkward. He walked upstairs quickly, and when he came down, he was holding Gwen's Phantom Spider combat suit. When Gwen took the combat suit, her eyes widened slightly, and her expression was stunned. What happened? Because she found that there was a big hole at the connection between the two trouser legs of the Spirit Spider combat suit. Hod touched his chin and hesitated for a long time. This is probably because the horsepower of the washing machine is too large. When he was playing yesterday, he didn't pay attention to these details when he was high. So after a whole night, it was not easy for this battle suit to be like this. Okay, Gwen could only pout and take the combat suit. But at this moment, her nose moved. The smell of the Ghost Spider combat suit seems to be wrong. Wrong. Hod's face became very strange. After all, he didn't throw the clothes out for washing. The reason why it was dry was entirely because of Wanda's body temperature, which forced the uniform to dry. So if there was a smell, it could only be, Mr. Hodder, I didn't expect your laundry detergent to smell like heather. Gwen figured out what the smell was at this time, frowning and saying, this smell is still a little too niche. She didn't know if this was the style of rich people's homes, so she was so confused. Oh, so I'll try a different flavor next time. Hodder looked embarrassed. This is not necessary. Gwen sniffed again, with a youthful smile on her face. But it's okay, changing to a new smell occasionally is also a new experience. Hodder let out a long sigh and said with a complicated expression, if you don't like the smell, go back and wash it again. At this moment, Gwen noticed the clock on the wall out of the corner of her eye. Oh no, I'm going to be late. Dong dong dong. You go to class first, I'll come find you later when I'm free. At this moment, Hod noticed the noise coming from upstairs and waved his right hand. With the emergence of golden light, the dimensional gate suddenly appeared in front of Gwen. Then I'll go first. Gwen smiled and nodded, then stepped into the dimensional door. After entering, she turned around and waved goodbye to Hod. As the dimensional gate disappeared, Hod finally felt relieved. Hod, what smells so good? Wanda supported herself on the stairs and staggered down the stairs little by little. It was the first time she smelled such a good smell. I just made breakfast not long ago. Huoda turned around, straightened his clothes and said with a smile. Breakfast? Wanda was a little surprised. She really didn't expect Hod to make breakfast. After all, she had never heard Hod mention this matter before, so she was so surprised when she heard about it. In her eyes, a rich boy like Hod should be similar to Tony. Yes, this is specially prepared for you. Hodder nodded proudly. At this moment, Wanda suddenly gritted her teeth in pain and snorted coldly. What's wrong with you? Hodder saw this and rushed forward to help. He had already noticed Wanda's strange steps. How dare you say that? This is all your fault. Wanda bit her lower lip and twisted Hod's waist fiercely with a complaining look. She didn't know what happened to Hod last night. He was so excited. He just put on the combat uniform of Ghost Spider, but it seemed that it was Hod who increased his combat power. She didn't breathe properly for the whole night. Even this morning, she was woken up by the pain. Your body is still too weak. You can't make me happy like this. Hod smiled evilly and hugged Wanda's waist, carefully supporting her and walking downstairs. After all, his fighting power is amazing. Who can make you happy? You are simply the most horrible pervert. Wanda rolled her eyes in annoyance. Her body is much stronger than that of ordinary people. Now she is saying that her physical fitness can't keep up. This is simply alarmist. You can definitely do it, and I will give you a good rest when the time comes. Hod's mouth corners rose, and he continued with a malicious voice, have you ever heard of like cures like? When Wanda heard this, Hood's teasing at the last breakfast suddenly emerged in her mind. I don't want to, you are such a bad person. Wanda shook her head without hesitation. With the help of Hood, Wanda came to the dining table and sat down. Hey, what's up with that bowl and fork? At this moment, Wanda noticed the remaining tableware on the table. And judging from the marks on it, it should have been used just now. Hearing this, Hood's head buzzed. He was so anxious just now that he forgot to put away Gwen's tableware. This is the bowl one used to taste the food when I cook. At this critical moment, Wanda suddenly had an idea and quickly explained. Oh, Wanda heard this and took the tableware. I'll give you a 3.2 set. Watching Wanda pick up the fork, Hodder's expression became very strange. There's no need. I don't mind you using it anyway. Wanda waved her hand and didn't take it to heart. After all, everything that needed to be done had already been done, so it was okay to use used utensils. Moreover, Hood also said that this was for tasting dishes. She had consumed too much energy last night, and she was so hungry that her stomach was sticking to her back. She didn't care about that anymore, and just started to eat heartily. Well, that's good, Hood, you can open a 5-star hotel and be a chef in the future. Wanda tasted the food made by Hood himself and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. It was much more delicious than she had imagined. She claimed that she had eaten a lot of good things, but compared with what Hood made, it was simply not on the same level. If it tastes good, eat more. Hodder sat next to Wanda. Why aren't you eating? Wanda noticed that Hood had been sitting next to her and asked in confusion. I don't need it. Hodder twitched his mouth. Just now he and Gwen were eating one mouthful after another. That's why there was only one bowl. He was already full and couldn't eat any more. No, skipping breakfast in the morning is bad for your health. Wanda picked up the fried bun and handed it to Hood without saying anything, and it's a waste if you don't finish it. Faced with Wanda's feeding, Hood's face turned pale, but he finally gritted his teeth and took a deep breath to eat it. As time went by, Wanda didn't stop until she felt the food was about to rise up her throat. After eating and drinking, Wanda leaned back in her chair, as if she suddenly remembered something. By the way, Hod, where is the ghost spider suit? How come I didn't find it when I got up just now? Wanda suddenly mentioned this battle suit because she wanted to put it away and wash it. After all, the battle suit is a personal item, and she can't just leave it to the maid to clean up. What, do you still want to? Hod never thought that Wanda would bring up this matter. And it was he who brought it up after he brought it back to Gwen. No, no, no. Wanda shook her head repeatedly. She couldn't even stand up now, so how could she possibly think about it? But she had to admit that it was quite interesting to transform into Ghost Spider-Man. As for that battle suit, I have thrown it away. If you like it, I can buy it again. Hodder smiled evilly. Who likes it? Wanda kept struggling in Hood's arms. But she found that the more she struggled, the more uncomfortable the gun on Hood's waist became. If you don't like me, how can you remember it so clearly? Hodder looked at Wanda restlessly. Wanda jumped up from her arms in fear. It's obviously you who likes me. Did you mistake me for a ghost spider yesterday? Because of that battle suit. Hodder's fighting power doubled yesterday. He almost wanted to tear her apart. How is that possible? You are slandering me. Blatant slander. How could Hood admit that he did think so yesterday? After all, thinking that there was a Gwen downstairs, the excitement was immediately maximized. Hee. Wanda snorted coldly and gently pushed Hood's head with her slender fingers. You were very happy last night. I was really happy, right? What do you think? Wanda had a half smile on his face. If you do this again, I won't want to talk to you anymore. Wanda sat on the chair with an unhappy face. After all, it didn't matter if it happened once or twice. If you think of her as a ghost spider every time, then what would she become? She is not a substitute. Okay, Wanda comforted, I will never let you do this again. I'll forgive you once. Wanda saw that he admitted his mistake seriously. However, you really need to practice chaos magic well. Hodder rubbed Wanda's head, his expression became more serious. Chaos magic is too harmful. If you don't practice it well, you will lose control one day. Although the control ability has improved now, it is far from enough. Wanda's true strength can completely affect the reality around her, so he is so serious. According to what you said. In fact, Wanda has taken time to contact Hood when she hasn't been with him recently. But the improvement is not great, and it is very difficult to influence reality more smoothly. There is no way to do what Hood did when he took her to practice. It is already very difficult to simply change some objects. No, you do it according to what is written in this book. Hodder shook his head and took out a parchment book out of thin air. Wanda's eyes widened. How did you do it? Because she didn't feel any fluctuations of magic just now, as if the parchment book was in Hodder's hand. Secret. Hodder grinned and continued. This is what you need to learn. What is this? What is written on it? Wanda frowned and looked at the contents of the parchment book, but she couldn't understand the words on it at all. These words seemed to not belong to this world at all. This is the Scroll of Sithan, and it fits the chaos magic in you very well. The Scroll of Sithoun, 2 halves. Just yesterday, Hod had obtained all the scrolls of Sithoun. The complete Scroll of Sithoun contains much more content than the Dark Book. Because the Dark Book is a copied version, and a large part of the dark magic and necromancy is missing. The actual difference between the two is very large, otherwise the Scroll of Sithoun would not have attracted the attention of so many dark wizards. After all, for them, this is the supreme divine object, and obtaining it is equivalent to getting the source of dark magic. It's just that the one he took out for Wanda now is a version that he has modified himself. Because there are many dark magics in it, it is not a good thing for Wanda to practice. Sithoun's magic itself is extremely persuasive, and it will subtly intensify the dark side deep in the practitioner's heart when practicing. Excessive practice may even cause the practitioner's soul to return to Sithoun. But he himself is not worried about this. After all, Wanda has chaos magic. What's more, as long as he is there, it feels impossible for Sithoun to succeed. The Scroll of Sithan. Wanda had never heard of this name, and the words on it could vaguely feel the evil aura. And looking at the ghostly talismans all over the sky, she felt dizzy and even a little drowsy. Don't worry, little fool, I will teach you. Hodder did not laugh at her, but sat down next to Wanda and spread the Scroll of Sithorn in his hand on the table. He knew very well that Wanda's past life was basically spent in smoke and escape. It was very good to be alive until now, not to mention the opportunity to learn. Moreover, the Scroll of Sithorn was basically written in ancient language, and basically not many people could understand it. In other words, even if some dark wizards took the Scroll of Sithorn away, they would not be able to learn anything in a short time. Just trying to decipher the ancient language on it has become a very difficult problem. Not everyone can master so many ancient languages. This threshold alone has blocked most people. You are stupid. Wanda felt warm in her heart. Although she didn't understand, Hood still took the time to teach her. This alone touched her deeply. Moreover, she could see that Hood was doing this for her own good, otherwise he would never repeat the matter of chaos magic again and again. Come, follow me. This section tells the origin of the Scroll of Sithan. As for this paragraph, it was fabricated by later generations, and it records the deeds of the ancient god Exasong. Hood opened the parchment book, placed his fingers on the lines of ancient language and began to explain. Although these have nothing to do with magic, they are extremely important because they are related to the vigilance and fear of Sithorn in the future. This is black magic after all, and every time it is used, it will be affected by Sithorn. The more vigilant you are about this, the more you will pay attention to it when using chaos magic in the future. As Hood explained, Wanda gradually got into the state, because Hood's explanation was very detailed. Many things that she didn't understand can be explained again and again in different ways. Yeah, I understand that too. As time went by, Wanda was still listening at first, but her eyes were gradually attracted to Hood beside her. She couldn't help but look at Hood's handsome face. When he was talking, his voice had a unique magnetism, and that gentle voice made Wanda fall deeply in love. Even she herself didn't realize that she had fallen deeper and deeper in Hood. The more you discover the mystery of a person, the easier it is to fall into it. She was completely fascinated by the man in front of her. All women admire strong men. Even if Wanda is already very strong, she can't help but be attracted to Hood. What's more, This is the man who brought her all kinds of first experiences in her life, even more so. Little witch, what on earth are you reading? Hod noticed that Wanda was distracted and reached out to flick her forehead lightly. What is so beautiful? Is there any knowledge in it? No, I just thought of something else. Wanda cried out in pain, covering her forehead and looking at Hood pitifully. She knew what was important, but even so, she still had trouble controlling her emotions. You've thought of something else, I see that's what you want to do. Hod grabbed Wanda's little face and gritted his teeth and said, if you don't listen, then you will be punished. He didn't want to go to Sithorn to fight with him one day. These are very important to Wanda, otherwise he would not have specially selected some magic for Wanda to practice. I didn't mean it, and I'm watching again. Wanda slapped the back of Hood's hand, rubbing her pink face and retorting indignantly. She quickly shifted her gaze to the book, but what emerged in her mind was not the knowledge. What appeared was Hood's figure and all the things Hood and she had done. Sometimes, after falling in love with someone, you can't help but think of that person no matter what you do. Although I have tried my best to control my emotions, it still has no practical effect. He can cook, is capable, handsome, and even his strength is unfathomable. Until now, Hood's background has not been figured out. Not only that, but more importantly, that waste seems to be made of vibranium, and it simply has endless power and energy. The more I think about it, the more confused my mind becomes, and I feel like I'm about to be filled up. It's just that what fills my mind is not knowledge, but something indescribable. Little witch, pay attention. Hodder looked at the witch's wispy eyes, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He even suspected that he had played too much. Now he seemed to be almost seeing the heart pupil. He didn't know where the eyes were floating on his body. Oh. Wanda came back to her senses after hearing Hord's cold shout. She quickly adjusted her posture, turned her eyes away from that, and returned to the parchment book. Wanda, you have to remember that your greatest advantage right now is chaos magic. So you must maximize your advantages. Because the spell is only auxiliary to you, you should practice chaos magic instead of the Scroll of Sithon. Hodder met Wanda's eyes and spoke in a serious tone. The biggest role of this spell for Wanda is to help control chaos magic. Because the power of chaos magic is very terrifying, being able to affect reality is equivalent to being invincible. For example, when he ran away and controlled the parallel world and killed the entire Avengers, it can also be seen how terrifying chaos magic is. Is that so? Wanda's face showed a thoughtful look. Although she said that she had seen the horror of her own power, she did not have a clear understanding. She just knew that it would make her power stronger. She basically used external force to attack the enemy. If it were not for Hood, she would not even know how to change it by controlling other things. Yes, as long as you can make the chaos magic in your body stronger, this is the real power, and the Dark Book is just an auxiliary tool. Hodder also knew that Wanda at this time had no idea how terrifying the power in her body was. This is one of the three ancient magics. As long as it is one of the three ancient magics, there must be no weak one. Looking at the entire universe, even the multiverse, it is an extremely terrifying energy. It can even be said that it is easy for Wanda to tear the purple potato spirit apart with her hands. If you can practice to the extreme, breaking through the single universe is only a matter of time. Yeah, I get it. Wanda nodded solemnly. She was in awe because Hood knew so many things. He knew everything about things that had nothing to do with him. He was like a powerful encyclopedia. Nothing could escape his eyes. He even knew his own chaos magic better than she did. So you must be serious. Of course, if you want that, I can reward you after you learn it. At this time, Hod's mouth corners slightly raised. With this wicked smile, he teased. You were really bad. Wanda looked at the change of expression and couldn't help but gently hit Hood's arm. Come, let's continue reading. What I need to teach you next is the text in it. Hodder rubbed Wanda's head, and then began to talk about the other contents in the parchment book. He knew very well that more haste makes waste, so this time he mainly taught Wanda to learn a few simpler spells. In fact, with Wanda's comprehension, this was not a problem at all. She had learned the meaning of it after just a few teachings. Boom! Wanda, who was sitting cross-legged on the chair, slowly opened her eyes, and her pupils flashed a scarlet light. A layer of flowing crimson light covered her fair skin, making her already charming even more unique. Wanda silently chanted the spell, reaching out to a bonsai. Whoosh! A scarlet light flashed. With a buzz, the flowers in the pot were instantly entangled by the scarlet light, and surrounded by the red light, it actually began to grow rapidly. The bonsai that was originally full of flowers also began to become twisted and hideous, spreading rapidly around like a vine. In just a blink of an eye, the plant was already covered with black barbs, and the originally green plant turned dark black. The spreading vines also tightly bound the other bonsai around it, and the barbs that grew out seemed to have life, constantly eroding the vitality of other bonsai. Very good, you learned it. Seeing this scene, Hood gave applause without hesitation. That's because you taught me well. Wanda took the initiative to hug Hood, and her flaming red lips gently touched his face. This is a reward for you. This reward alone is not enough. Hood tapped Wanda's mouth with his finger, and you kissed the wrong place. No, I'm very tired now. Wanda knew what Hood was thinking. So what do you think we should do? Hodder could see that Wanda seemed to have other ideas. I want to go out with you tonight. Wanda leaned close to Hood's ear and said in a gentle voice, come back tonight and I'll give you a big surprise. What? Hood's ears were tickled by her. He wanted to kill her right there and then. But thinking of the surprise tonight, he had to endure it. He pinched the witch's face and said, we agreed that you are not allowed to lie. Well, I'm not lying. Wanda opened the black Sithorn scroll and looked at the contents seriously. I want to continue studying, don't disturb me. I'm in the backyard, if you want it, come find me. Hood pinched Wanda. Looking at Hood leaving, Wanda's mouth twitched slightly. How can this guy always say such shameless words? In the backyard of the manor, Hood walked slowly into the lawn. Looking around, the manor was surrounded by a high wall of more than 30 meters. The 50-acre backyard is even large enough for people to drive around. The luxury level can be ranked the highest in New York. Swimming pools, football fields, basketball courts, and golf courses are all available. Not far away, a yard was specially built for parking cars so that the backyard can be better taken care of. There is even a huge stone sculpture in the center of the backyard. It is a giant horse made of stone, roaring at the sky on 1 foot. Originally, the high wall here was less than 5 meters, and later he considered the rewards given by the experimental system. He simply asked someone to increase the height of the high wall to 30 meters. The thickness of the wall alone has reached 6 meters. Even if the shells hit the wall head-on, they would remain unscathed. Since even Wanda has worked so hard, I should also get familiar with my abilities. Hodder stretched and yawned lazily. He had been doing intense exercise these days and had not practiced his abilities properly. This was a good opportunity for him to practice his abilities while Wanda was practicing. He had not studied the reward he received last time, so he took this opportunity to study that ability. Looking at the endless sky and the beautiful scenery in the backyard, he felt a little happier. The power of the fire element. Huoda just said it silently in his heart, and the system panel instantly appeared in front of him. Power of the fire element. The owner will have super strong control over the fire element. The higher the development depth, the stronger the control over the fire element. This reward is really good. He couldn't help but sigh that completing the mission of the barbarian bull really rewarded him with something good. The god-level magic talent gave him the talent to learn magic faster, and now he has the power of the fire element, which means that he can easily control the power. Although it is not as good as the power of the phoenix, it is one of the natural elements after all, and it can still be of great use in battle. Snap! Hood raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. I saw a wisp of flame like a swimming snake ignited on his index finger. This flame kept wandering on his fingertips, and even wrapped around his index finger. Just a thought, this flame can even swallow and spit out its tongue like a fire snake. From this, it can be seen that the control of the flame can be extremely delicate. Don't look at it as just a detail, but the details are extremely important in the battle. Fire Lotus. Hood muttered in his heart and suddenly opened his palm. The original small fire snake burst instantly, forming a lifelike flame lotus on his palm. With just a thought, the flame lotus began to surge continuously, and at the same time began to shrink continuously into a fireball the size of a fingernail. This is to compress all the fire elements together. Although it looks small, it contains extremely terrifying energy. Once Hod shoots it out now, the explosive power is no less than that of a cruise missile. Then, he put his hands together, and the fireball floated in the sky and slowly dispersed to form words. The raging heat wave swept over immediately. Although it was a floating flame in the air, it still made the grass on the lawn bend and turn yellow, and even began to dry up. Explode. Hodder only had a thought, and the words exploded instantly. At the moment of the explosion, the space around the flames began to distort due to the rapid rise in temperature. The scorching heat wave rolled in, and the powerful power even caused the dry grass on the ground to start igniting flames. This should also work this way. Just as he was thinking, the flames had already wrapped around his body along his fists. But strangely enough, after the flames wrapped around him, his clothes and hair were not affected at all. But judging from the feedback from the surroundings, the flames simply had no effect on Hood. This is the horror of being able to finally control the flames. As long as he is willing, he can even stop the enemy who wants to attack him from losing 1002. After a series of attempts, Hood waved his hand to disperse the flames. It must be said that this flame is far more interesting than he imagined. Because of the power of fire, it can even change into various forms. For example, letting the flames erupt at a designated location, this alone can crush most magicians. However, because his development of the fire element is too low, there is no way to continue to make fire. I'll practice it later. Hod shook his head deeply, not planning to continue playing with fire. Although this reward is good, it is still far from the power of the phoenix. Next, he also plans to practice the power of the phoenix. Although his research on the power of the phoenix is deeper than Wanda's research on the power of chaos. But after all, he has not taken the time to practice it carefully, and he relies entirely on actual combat to practice. The power of the phoenix. Hodder looked at the entire backyard, with an orange-red light in his eyes. As he raised his right hand, a ball of power containing terrifying energy instantly shot out from his fingertips. It was a dark red energy line, and one could even vaguely see the energy on the line jumping. And the next second, this energy went directly into the ground. When the energy entered the ground, it spread rapidly around as if it could be infected. In Hodder's perception, he could even devour everything with this little bit of phoenix power. Boom! The originally cloudless and clear sky became extremely gloomy at this time. The bright sunshine also disappeared without a trace, and the sweeping breeze turned into a terrifying hurricane in an instant. In addition to the whistling, the sky was also covered with dark clouds, and purple lightning flashed in the sky, and the thunder resounded through the world. For a moment, it seemed like entering the end of the world. If you look up, you can even see the dark clouds pressing down. The surrounding trees were rattling at this time because of the violent hurricane. The leaves were also swept away by the hurricane. Countless leaves were constantly flying in the sky with the hurricane, and it was extremely terrifying to look at. Even the water in the swimming pool in the backyard was constantly surging and roaring, as if seeing something extremely terrifying. The statues, fences, swimming pools, ball hoops, and trees underwent extremely strange changes at this time. They actually began to shatter one by one, turning into gray-black dust and flying towards the sky with the hurricane. Even the green lawn was not spared at this moment. The earth wailed, and the lawn began to shatter into countless tiny particles flying all over the sky. Cracks appeared in the land in an instant, as if a giant reached into the earth and tore it apart. Crack! The next second, countless cracks spread rapidly around, and the broken edges were even swallowed by the power of the phoenix. What followed was the collapse of the earth. The yard that originally looked peaceful was now left with only a huge sinkhole. Looking at this huge sinkhole, even Hood couldn't help but sigh. Is this the essence of the phoenix force, to annihilate everything in the world? Hod could even feel that this energy had not reached its limit, and the energy was still surging in his body. It seemed to be urging him to burst out with his true power. The violent power seemed to destroy everything at this time. Since you want to destroy, I will destroy you. Hod opened his arms and looked up at the sky with a faint smile. The terrifying energy also spread rapidly at this time. At the same time, Wanda, who was looking at the Sithorn scroll in the house, suddenly felt horrified. Because she could clearly feel the terrifying power coming from the backyard, this power even made her spine chill instantly. Hotter. Wanda didn't care about anything else, picked up the parchment book and rushed towards the backyard. But when she ran to the backyard, her steps stopped. Because the scene that came into her eyes was too terrifying, even beyond her cognition. The scene of the sudden change of the world, the cracked earth, and the storm accompanied by the roar of the storm all proved the horror of this power. And there was obviously no big movement, but a huge deep pit appeared on the ground. It was as if something had swallowed a piece of it out of thin air, and even the cross-section of the swallowed big stone underground was extremely smooth. And Hodder was suspended above this huge deep pit. He opened his hands, as if he was a god descending from the sky. It only brought indescribable fear and indescribable despair. To read violent novels, go to Philu Novel Network. Hod, what's going on? Wanda cast a horrified look at Hod. The more she looked, the more shocked she was by the powerful energy in Hod's body. She boasted that her chaos magic was already very strong, but in front of Hod's power, it was nothing. And she knew very well that the power Hod released now was much stronger than when he dealt with the barbarian bulls. Or it could be said that Hod had already mastered this power very well, so last time he just controlled this energy so that it would not cause damage. But the more this happened, the more terrifying it was, because the more terrifying power one had in the body, the more difficult it was to control it precisely. It was like an adult chopping wood with an axe weighing more than 10 pounds and a child chopping wood with an axe weighing more than 10 pounds. There was already a big difference in the grasp of strength, and it was for this reason that this power was so terrifying. What was even more terrifying at this time was that this power did not stop, but spread outward rapidly like a desert that devoured all life. Wherever it went, trees and land would be crushed into black powder by this power. No matter how hard something is, it is impossible to escape the engulfment of this force at this moment. When this range reaches the towering wall, the wall quickly collapses and shatters. Hodder, are you going to tear this place down? Wanda shouted in a hurry, watching the house almost gone. She didn't even dare to approach Hodder now, because the source of this power was Hodder. Once she approached rashly, she didn't know if she would be dissipated in the world along with all these things. At this time, Hodder did not pay attention to Wanda not far away, but slowly closed his eyes, feeling this power with a smile. This power is like an addictive poison. He can even feel that he can rely on this power to become the most powerful existence in the world. Interesting, this is so interesting. After letting go of his hands and feet, Hodder raised his mouth, even though he had closed his eyes. But he could clearly feel the changes, annihilation and disappearance of all the matter around him. This was a very strange feeling. He could even feel that everything around him could disappear through his thoughts. He could even clearly feel the flow of this power. In order to further control the power of the Phoenix, Hodder once again shot out a stream of energy from his fingertips. With the injection of this energy, everything around him shattered faster. This guy, he really doesn't even want the house anymore. Wanda looked at Hood from a distance, with a helpless look on her face. All she could do was wait quietly. Because this terrifying energy was constantly surging and spreading. This was no longer something she could stop. At the same time, inside the Avengers base, Rod, aren't you bored playing with those things every day? Natasha lay on the sofa with her legs dangling unscrupulously on the expensive table. In her left hand, she held a handful of melon seeds. I don't know if she was infected by Tony. Recently, she likes to eat melon seeds to pass the time. This is to promote scientific research. Rod carefully assembled the weapons in front of him. After all, no one knows what dangers will appear in this world in the next moment. Beep, beep. Rod's hand trembled, and the weapon he was assembling fell to the ground. He looked back with an impatient look, and saw that the machine developed by Tony was constantly flashing. Why is this thing making a noise? Rhodes quickly came to the detection instrument. When he saw the display on it, his eyes shrank into pinpoints. The energy value marked on the instrument was rising rapidly, and the speed of the rise was getting faster and faster. The energy fluctuations that appeared at present were already able to compete with Little Boy. For a moment, he wondered if other countries had thrown something incredible at them, the United States. How is this possible? This force is too strong. He widened his eyes and even began to wonder if there was something wrong with the instrument. Natasha, go call Tony over here. Yes, okay. Rod turned and yelled at Natasha not far away, his eyes filled with anxiety. If there is nothing wrong with this instrument, then they will be in big trouble this time. This force is much stronger than all of them put together. Natasha didn't even bother to eat. She threw all the melon seeds on the table and ran to Tony's office in a hurry. What? The value is still rising. Tony's face suddenly changed when he got the news. He was still very confident in the scientific research he developed. The instrument had provided a lot of help before, but at this time it had risen to this value. He ran directly to the laboratory in the base. When the door was opened, all the Avengers members in the base arrived here. Huge energy field fluctuations detected. Tony looked at the display above, his face became extremely solemn. Since the development of the instrument for detecting energy fluctuations, there has never been such a situation. Tony, can you think of a way to find the location of the energy fluctuation? Steve looked at Tony in front of the instrument with a serious expression. Since such a serious thing has happened, no matter what the situation is now, they must rush to the first place. Wait, Tony waved his right hand in the air, and a virtual keyboard suddenly appeared. He quickly typed in the air, and when he pressed the enter key, everyone's eyes were focused on the instrument in front of them. The panel searched quickly and finally detected a large area. This was clearly a location outside New York. This position. Tony's face suddenly changed when he saw this position. What's wrong? It was the first time Steve saw Tony so nervous. My friend's house is in this area. Tony looked serious. This is the area where Hood's house is. Hotter. Rhodes was surprised. It was the first time he saw Tony look so nervous. This is a very good friend of mine. He might be in danger now. Although he has known Hood for less than half a year, Hood has become Tony's best friend. He not only confides his troubles to him, but also gives him good advice on future decisions. Judging from the reaction on the screen, the glowing marked area is the location of Hood's home. Friday, prepare the plane. Tony called. If Hood was in danger, he had to rush to the scene as soon as possible. Tony, don't worry, we don't even know what's going on right now. Steve frowned. If they rushed over without any preparation, the most likely outcome would be that they would be annihilated. Moreover, the energy fluctuations they encountered this time were the strongest they had ever seen. Even if all of them were deployed, they would not be able to defeat them. How can I not be anxious? This is my best friend. Tony's forehead was bulging with veins, and even his body was shaking slightly. Even if you rush over now, you may not be in time. Let's take a look at the current situation first. Natasha also persuaded from the side. With the current energy fluctuations, even if Tony went over himself, it would be useless. And there was actually one thing she wanted to say but didn't say, that is, maybe Tony's good friend is already dead. Because the area covered by this energy is really too large, and judging from this fluctuation, it is still spreading rapidly to other locations. I think so too. Barton, who was standing by with his arms crossed, could not help but nod slightly. Have you ever considered our team? You can't joke with everyone's life. Sam walked quickly to Tony's side and put his hand on Tony's shoulder. He could understand Tony's feelings, but this was definitely not the time to act on impulse. He should be more concerned about the direction of the energy fluctuations. He also needed to find out what was going on, and whether S.H.I.E.L.D. needed to assist. No, look, the detection data in the area has begun to change. Rhodes looked at the data displayed in the upper right corner, and his urgent voice attracted everyone's attention. On Friday, immediately detect any signs of data fluctuations and analyze all the information. Tony gritted his teeth, his voice filled with endless anger. If his friend was hurt, he would never let the culprit go. Boss, the previous detection data is biased. After a moment, Friday's voice sounded, and the picture on the device screen began to flash. 817. In the picture, the energy fluctuation was just in the opposite direction to the east. Steve, take someone to investigate the situation over there. After seeing that the energy fluctuations were not at Hood's house, Tony felt like he was about to collapse. He simply gave the task to Steve. After all, Captain America likes to go out on missions more than anyone else. Okay, I'll be there now. Steve nodded in agreement. At this moment, Tony paused and said, "Be careful, this may be a conspiracy of Hydra." "Yeah," Steve responded casually, and was about to walk out quickly. But at this moment, he seemed to remember something and asked, "Where's Wanda?" All of them were there just now, only Wanda was missing. And Wanda was elusive during this period of time, and even when she went out, she left quietly. It was as if there was something she couldn't tell anyone. "I don't know." Natasha had a strange expression on her face, and said with a half smile, "Anyway, I didn't see her yesterday afternoon, and she didn't return to the base last night. Could something have happened to her?" Rode frowned. "Wanda used to hate going out. But she has hardly been seen recently. Didn't come back last night." Steve's voice was a little more surprised. He also knew that Wanda was a relatively conservative and introverted person. So she would not go out if she could, and would come back soon even if she went out. Basically, she stayed in the base most of the time. And during this period of time, she basically hadn't seen anyone. Wanda would not be like this in the past. "Don't worry about it. Everyone has their own private life." Natasha spread her hands and looked at everyone with a nonchalant look. She was probably the only one who could guess what was going on. After all, when Wanda came back, she would sometimes sit on the sofa and giggle. There was only one possibility for this look, that is, she had someone she liked. And her originally fair cheeks were a little more rosy. If it wasn't for some kind of nourishment, she would never believe it. What girl doesn't have spring in her heart? Yes, I also think that we should not pay too much attention to it. Everyone has their own privacy. Even Tony walked to Steve's side, patted his shoulder and shook his head to persuade him. After all, Hood had told him that he should keep trust in his teammates. He also believed that one day, Wanda would tell him these things. So what they need to do now is to wait patiently for the day when she tells them. "Tony." Steve looked at Tony with a strange expression. "You were not like this before." He had seen how angry Tony was about Wanda's concealment. He even slammed the door when he left. Now, he didn't care about these things at all. This was simply incredible. "I'm not like some people who are old-fashioned and can't adapt." Tony spread his hands, raised his eyebrows slightly, and looked at Steve with a mocking expression. "Okay, Steve, you should get busy." Natasha took the initiative to say at this time, "Anyway, Wanda will definitely find a time to tell us what happened." She didn't want to see these men pointing fingers at Wanda's private life. Wanda finally got out of her previous state. Don't let these guys mess it up for Wanda. Boom. There were thunder and lightning in the sky, and dark clouds were gathering. Everywhere you look is a wasteland. The power of the Phoenix began to decompose and melt everything it touched at an extremely terrifying speed. The trees and grass on the edge disappeared in a flash. Only empty land was left. The originally beautiful backyard was no longer recognizable at this time. If you look down from above, this sunken ground looks so abrupt. Compared with the scenery in other places, it forms an extremely strong contrast. Vitality and lifelessness. If someone sees this scene, they will definitely be shocked. It was as if it was a power that did not belong to humans at all, and only gods could do such a terrifying thing. More and more black particles were decomposed, and the strong wind carrying the black particles swirled in the air like a black tornado. And Hood was floating in the air, like a god who controlled all living things in the world. Although he was floating in the air, his figure remained motionless in this terrifying storm. Although the endless wind and sand blocked his vision, Hood's figure was so conspicuous in the air. His whole body was glowing with red light, just like blood-red stars in the dead night. His whole body was emitting an extremely terrifying aura. The voice of the Red Queen sounded in his ears. "Master, the Avengers have detected your presence, and I have tampered with their detection values." "Hodder, stop it." Wanda looked at the Phoenix force spreading towards her, and could only fly into the air, shouting at Hodder anxiously. She didn't know what was going on with Hodder now, and everything he did was beyond her imagination. But she could only hold on to her thin nightgown, and the wind blew up the hem of her skirt, revealing her long white legs. Because she came out in such a hurry, she was still wearing simple home clothes. What worried her even more was that if Hodder continued, the house behind him would probably be completely destroyed. "Don't worry." Hodder looked at the manor in the distance calmly, then turned to look at the ruined environment. Boom! He clasped his hands behind his back, and the phoenix force that had been spreading stopped expanding at this moment. And the next second, everything around seemed to be rewound. The black particles in the sky seemed to be flying quickly back to their original positions. At this time, it seemed as if a black drizzle was falling from the sky. The moment the drizzle touched the ground, everything around began to recover quickly. Every time a part of the phoenix force shrinks, the position that was originally swallowed will return to its original state. It was as if there was an invisible hand that was constantly restoring the damaged items. The originally destroyed flowers, trees, houses, land, and high walls were all restored one by one. Oh my God! Wanda's mouth opened slightly, although she had seen Hood control his power to affect everything around him. But this was completely different from Hood's. This was already restoring all the destroyed things. How terrifying power was needed to do all this. She had never thought that Hood would have such a powerful power. This power had completely broken her original concept. In her original idea, no matter how powerful the magic was, it could only affect a few dozen meters around. But Hood taught her a lesson in a completely different way. As long as you can control the power, even a large range can be changed. She could also feel that the reason why Hood did not continue to release energy was not because of insufficient energy. To be precise, Hood gave her the feeling that he was tired of playing. You and I are the same. After restoring everything, Hood slowly floated to Wanda's side and hugged Wanda's slender waist. We both have the ability to create and destroy. Since the Phoenix Force can turn everything into dust, even nothingness, then naturally it can turn dust into water, and water into life. He just repaired everything again. Of course, the premise is to have super control over the Phoenix Force. After Hood got the second Phoenix fragment, he had already mastered the control of the Phoenix Force, and his strength has reached the level of a father. All this is not a problem for him at all. It's just that even he used the Phoenix Force on such a large scale for the first time. I have to sigh that even he himself was a little surprised. Incredible, this is really no different from a miracle. When Wanda spoke, even her voice was a little dull. It was like a dream, watching everything being destroyed. But it was restored to its original state. This strength was too terrifying. She now had a feeling that all the Avengers together might not be Hood's opponent. Isn't it handsome? Hodder hugged Wanda in front of him, raised the corner of his mouth and said with a sly smile. Yeah, Wanda tapped Hood's lips lightly. This is to encourage you. Seeing Hood's powerful strength, Wanda couldn't help but get excited. After all, this is the person she loves the most. The stronger he is, the safer he is. That's all the encouragement. It won't do anything. Hod held Wanda in his arms and slowly landed on the ground, his tongue sweeping across her lips. No, you promised me tonight, you can't go back on your word. Just one move, Wanda knew that this guy had something unhealthy in his mind again. After all, after the last time, Hood seemed to have different interests in different positions. Why must it be tonight? Hod looked at Wanda in confusion. Wanda had said many times that she wanted to go out tonight. He couldn't understand why girls liked to go out so much. Wait, you'll know after we get out. Wanda smiled mysteriously, but she didn't tell Hood about her plan. Wait, Huoda's eyes suddenly widened. Are you planning to go outside? Do you like this? You actually like? He was really shocked. Could it be that he awakened something incredible during the last meal? Ouch! But before he could finish his words, Wanda twisted his waist fiercely. You will die if you don't let your mind run wild, right? And if you keep talking nonsense, don't blame me for biting you to pieces next time. Wanda shook her head helplessly. She couldn't understand why Hood could think about everything in that way. In a way, this was already very dirty. And it didn't look like he wasn't full. How could someone stuff food into his stomach after being full? Have you finished reading the book? Hodder saw that Wanda was about to get angry, so he quickly changed the subject. It's right here. Wanda waved the parchment book in her hand and shook her head helplessly. Who would have the mood to read a book when you make such a big noise? She thought that Hood was out of control, otherwise how could he make such a big noise? Since you haven't seen it, don't look at it for now. Hod's mouth corners slightly raised, feeling the smoothness of the touch. We have to combine work and rest, take a nap first. After all, it is impossible to study this kind of thing all the time, and you have to relax your body and mind. It just so happens that he wants to have a good time now, so he can have another one before going out. Nap. We just got up not long ago. Wanda immediately understood what Hood meant. This was not a nap at all. He was clearly going to take her to study the principle and structure of the shield machine. Before Wanda could react, Hood had already opened the dimensional door. He hugged Wanda and stepped into the bedroom. Opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis. At the same time, in Hell's Kitchen, New York, in an unremarkable apartment, the walls of the room were covered with all kinds of weird patterns. Just looking at it made people's scalps numb. There was a faint white smoke in the air, and there was a slight smell of blood in the air. Agatha, who was meditating in the middle of the living room, suddenly opened her eyes. It's the breath of the Phoenix Force. Is that guy releasing the Phoenix Force? No, that shouldn't be the case. It's hard for people who haven't learned magic to be able to do it freely. Control the Phoenix Force in the body. Unless that guy is gifted. Obviously impossible. There are very few gifted mages on Earth. Even in Kamar Taj, it is difficult to find a genius in 100 years. Oblivion. Agatha felt this power, her eyes full of greed. This was the power she was willing to give up everything to get. She slowly stood up, holding the ground, and picked up the black rabbit on the ground. Mr. Strachey, it's time to return Chaos Magic and Phoenix Force to their rightful owners. This is my first time, early. Ding. You enjoyed a wonderful nap. Reward. Transformers, Bumblebee. Hod opened his eyes, and the system prompt sound echoed in his mind. Transformers Bumblebee. The reward was actually a bumblebee. He really didn't expect to get such a reward. A long time ago, he had imagined that he would own a bumblebee. After all, it was simply too cool, not only in appearance, but also in combat power. Although this thing is not as eye-catching as other luxury cars, but the bumblebee is indeed one of the things he wants most. Transformers, Bumblebee. It is the dream of all men to own a transformer, and it is now parked in your garage. Mwah. Hod hugged Wanda beside him and kissed her hard on the face. Since Wanda appeared, the rewards he got were all good. This is really a big treasure falling from the sky. This is already his lucky star. What's wrong with you? Wanda noticed the excited smile on Hood's face. He was lying quietly just now, but now he couldn't stop smiling. Could it be that because she couldn't stop smiling just now, he was also smiling happily? Otherwise, she really couldn't understand why Hood was so happy. I just got a new car. Let me take you for a ride. After getting the bumblebee, Hood couldn't wait to try it out. After saying that, he picked up Wanda and said, let's take a shower first, and then go out immediately. Is it necessary to be so anxious? Wanda really couldn't understand what kind of car could make a rich man like Hood so excited. After all, judging from Hood's ability, even buying the most expensive car in the world would not be a problem. You'll know in a minute. Hood picked her up and walked towards the bathroom. 2 hours later, Wanda followed Hood to the garage with weak legs. Look, it's the yellow one. Hodder pointed excitedly at the Volkswagen Beetle in the middle of the garage, and was stunned for a moment. This shouldn't be the case. How could it be a Beetle? Is this the car you mentioned? Wanda covered her mouth and couldn't help laughing. After all, this Volkswagen Beetle looked too out of place among those cool cars. Any other car could buy hundreds of Beetles. She looked at Hood's surprised expression and couldn't help laughing. After all, Hood looked like a child who got a gift. But after opening the gift, he found that it was homework. This shouldn't be. Hod twitched his mouth. If he remembered correctly, this should be a Chevrolet Camaro. Soon he suddenly remembered that Bumblebee could scan the appearance of other cars and transform them. I didn't expect you to like this old car that's almost broken. Wanda held back her laughter, patted Hodder on the shoulder and said, who is laughing at me? The speakers in the yellow Volkswagen Beetle suddenly said, I can go so fast that you want to vomit. The speakers in the car were sometimes male and sometimes female, and they kept switching between different channels. It can actually talk. Wanda couldn't help but be a little surprised. Such an old Beetle is actually equipped with artificial intelligence. She really didn't expect that someone would be willing to install artificial intelligence on this broken car. After all, Artificial intelligence is a high-end technology, of course it is not the current kind. For example, Tony's Friday, this kind of artificial intelligence is very difficult to develop. So similar technology is actually installed on this kind of car. It's not artificial intelligence. Hod smiled and said, it has its own consciousness. I am a little old, but I am not useless. Crack, crack. At this moment, the appearance of the yellow beetle began to change rapidly. With the sound, it trembled a few times and rose from the ground. Soon it formed a tall robot, and the yellow paint on its body made it look extremely handsome. Bumblebee looked down at Wanda. It's so cool, it can also turn into a robot. Wanda stepped back in surprise, and the tall Bumblebee's head in front of her hit the ceiling. She really didn't expect that this car could turn into this. And it was actually quite cool after the transformation. She finally understood why Horde was so excited. This kind of thing might really have a fatal attraction to men. Woman, now you know how cool I am, Bumblebee said, proudly standing on tiptoe. Although the voice he made was that of a child, one could still hear the boastful tone. It's so strange, why is your voice different every time? Wanda asked in a surprised tone. It sounded like something was wrong. Its generator is broken, so it can only speak through the radio. Hod remembers the original plot very clearly, after all, he watched the movie 2 or 3 times. So now Bumblebee can only extract sounds from different radio stations to reply. It's actually possible to do this. Wanda's eyes sparkled, because this is even cooler. When talking, it can even change into different voices. It's like those mechanical creatures in science fiction movies. Am I really amazing? I am much better than those old cars you mentioned. The Bumblebee shook his body excitedly after receiving the praise. He could tell that this was his master's lover, so he deliberately showed his. What a pity. Wanda shook her head and complained helplessly, but the beetle is still a little too ugly. After all, Hood is a man of noble status. If he drives a beetle out, it would be too cheap for Hood. Even if he is said to be low-key, he shouldn't be so low-key. You look at, click. At this moment, Bumblebee began to change rapidly the moment he lay down. The protruding armor on his body began to shrink rapidly in just a few seconds. Bumblebee had turned back into a car, and what surprised Wanda even more was that it was a different model. This is clearly a Chevrolet Camaro. The classic black stripes extend from the center of the front to the rear. The appearance of the sports car and the slightly upturned hood show a unique taste. Although it is yellow in appearance, it is not so ostentatious, but rather a little restrained and exudes style. How on earth did this happen? Wanda's eyes widened, her face full of disbelief. She had seen a lot of high tech, and if it could transform from a car to a robot and back again, she wouldn't be particularly surprised. What surprised her was that it could actually transform from a beetle into something else. This made her completely confused as to how this was done. What do you think? I'm not a broken car. After Bumblebee made a sound, the doors on both sides of the car suddenly opened. Come on, get in the car, I'll take you to go racing. Let's go out for a walk. Hod pulled Wanda into the car. Sit tight. Get ready to go. The car's speakers sounded. Then came the fierce roar of the engine and the strong sense of pushing back. With the roar of the accelerator, the yellow shadow drove quickly onto the road. And the speed of the car was rising rapidly, reaching more than 200 kilometers per hour in just a few seconds. Holy shit, what was that car that just passed by? How could a Chevrolet Camaro overtake my Lamborghini? The driver who was speeding on the road looked at the disappearing taillights, and his expression became stiff. He was already driving at a speed of 180 kilometers per hour, but he was overtaken in the blink of an eye. Hod was holding the steering wheel with one hand at this time. If he was not worried about being too shocking, he would not want to hold the steering wheel to pretend. After all, Bumblebee has self-awareness and can drive itself. So fast. Wanda held the seat belt tightly. Although she could do it in the air, it was a completely different experience to be in the car. Even her adrenaline began to be secreted, and an unprecedented sense of excitement surged to her head. I haven't let go yet. Bumblebee's arrogant voice came from the speakers. There is a turn ahead, slow down. Wanda warned with a trembling voice that it is very likely to overturn if the car passes the turn at this speed. But Bumblebee's speed did not slow down, but even faster. At this time, Hood also turned the steering wheel sharply, but did not turn the car around. Instead, he rushed to the side of the road. Ah! Wanda's face suddenly changed when she saw this scene, and even her lips turned pale. If thrown out at this speed, it is very likely to be seriously injured. But there was no fear on Hood's face, instead he stepped on the accelerator to the bottom. Click! The next second, the door near Hood suddenly turned into a mechanical hand. It instantly supported the ground, and with sparks flying all the way, it instantly made a perfect tail swing turn. It returned to the road and continued to speed. Why are you driving so fast? Wanda complained with rapid breathing. She almost wanted to use chaos magic just now. You scared me to death. You can always trust Bumblebee, it will never let you fall over and get hurt. Hodder's mouth curled up. He knew Bumblebee's ability very well. Even if the two of them flew high in the sky, Bumblebee could transform in the air and catch them safely. Heartless. Although Wanda knew that Hood would not lie to her, she was still scared. She couldn't help but let go of her left hand holding the seat belt and hit Hood's arm. She could see that Hood was deliberately trying to scare her. Where are you going to take me today? Hodder looked at Wanda and asked with a puzzled look. After all, Wanda was acting mysterious today, which made him curious. Go to Gualin Beach. Wanda looked at Hodd with a smile, and there was a little excitement in her eyes. Gualin Beach. Hodd was a little surprised. After all, going to the beach in autumn is not a particularly wise choice. Not only is it impossible to go to the beach in this weather, but many coastal shops are closed. The only advantage is that there are fewer people on the beach at this time, which is more suitable for couples to go sightseeing. Bumblebee, let's go. Go to Gualin Beach. Hodd gave the order and simply let Bumblebee drive. After all, Bumblebee has navigation and can drive much faster than him. Got it. Heading to Orchard Beach. A voice came from the speakers, and then they disappeared into the horizon. Orchard Beach is a famous beach in New York. As the car stopped on the beach, Hood held Wanda's hand and walked to the beach. Looking at the waves, he had to admit that this place was indeed a tourist destination. The weather was mild and sunny, the light blue sky covered the top of their heads like a lake, and seagulls were circling with cries. The fishy and salty sea breeze blew on the two of them, and a unique smell of the seaside came. Because of the weather, there were fewer people on the beach. But because it is a well-known tourist attraction, even if there are fewer people, there will be many. And most of them are couples, who come here to see the scenery. It's much better here than in the photos. On the beach, under the coconut trees, Wanda took a deep breath in the sea breeze. You've never been here before. Hodd looked at Wanda in confusion. I thought Wanda had been here, so I wanted to bring him here. Yeah, Wanda seemed to recall something in the past, and said with a depressed look, after coming to the United States, I stayed in the laboratory and then the Avengers base. I often had to carry out missions, so I didn't have much time to go out and play. In addition, because of her bad reputation, she didn't dare to sneak out in her free time. It was also because of this opportunity that she wanted to come to this beach with Hood that she had wanted to come to for a long time. Then you can enjoy yourself now. Hodder couldn't help but feel distressed when he looked at Wanda, who looked gloomy. The witch's life was really uprooted. If it weren't for his appearance, perhaps her uprooted life would never end. After all, in the original book, the Scarlet Witch's final ending was very miserable. I want to soak my feet in the sea. Wanda looked at the sea, the blue sea, the strong wind blowing the sea surface up and down, the waves sparkling. Let's go soak our feet together. Hood also wanted to try it. While helping Wanda take off her shoes, he continued, although Gualin Beach is nice, there are too many people, so forget about swimming. There are still many people on the beach now, and he doesn't want to see his own beauty wearing a swimsuit and being seen by others. If she really wants to swim, he can just book a place when he has time. By the way, Hodd, I want to show you something. At this moment, Wanda took a deep breath, as if she had made up her mind. What? Hodder looked at Wanda with a puzzled look. Is Wanda, who has been mysterious today, finally going to reveal the answer at this time? After all, since he came here, he noticed that Wanda was hesitating, as if she was about to say something. Look, Wanda closed her eyes and forced herself to calm down. She pulled out the scarf she carried with her from her pocket and shook it in front of Hood. Then, with the appearance of a crimson light, the scarf slowly stood up. The blood-red scarf actually began to change, with green branches extending on both sides. A tender red rose slowly grew on the top. Seeing this scene, Hood's expression was stunned. What was going on? He had never thought that Wanda would actually send him flowers. Wanda took a deep breath and prepared to speak out her thoughts. In fact, she had always wanted to have a relationship with Hood that she could talk about. But fear made her never bring it up. But at this moment, her heart was in turmoil. She looked at the rose stuffed in her arms and was about to ask. Boom! Suddenly, the sky was covered with dark clouds. A black line swept in from the horizon and instantly covered the entire beach. The atmosphere of terror was everywhere. A strong pressure filled the air. Someone is coming. Hod blocked Wanda's red lips with his index finger, signaling her not to speak. Not far away, in the sky, there was lightning and thunder. A strange figure appeared. Her face was covered with a strange smile under her hooked nose. At this time, it became depressing, and dark clouds appeared in the sky. The originally blue sea was covered by large patches of dark clouds, and even the color of the seawater turned dark black. The calm sea surface was like an angry creature at this time, with huge waves rising and rushing towards the shore quickly. An indescribable dark breath rushed towards the two people. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.